audience, and then we will get started. There will be no opening statements, but I will give you a chance to kind of introduce yourself, tell people very briefly who you are, and then we'll start. And I have a couple questions. I know that you only have about an hour, hour and a half with us,
Oh no,
Mr.
that's been canceled. I'm here for the full thing. I've been
Oh,
pushed back a whole week. I was
damn.
usurped by a DNC staffer, a Biden staffer, who is
Oh shit.
exclusive
Dude,
to
that happens to
Wednesday.
me all the time. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
They got
yeah.
you. They
I
they
gotta
uh
piss real
they
quick. I'll be back.
booted you. That's crazy. Okay, go
hmm
go piss. But when you get back, we'll start. But yeah, basically, I'll you're kind of like the new guy, the person who'd never read Lord of the Rings before. So I kind of want to get your
Questions? I know that,
perspective first, and then we'll
you
just
only
kind of
have-
transition into the open discussion. Are there any questions before I hit go live?
To be clear, I've actually only skimmed Lord of the Rings. I've never fully read them. Read
All
them.
right, so I'm
Yeah.
not the least informed person here now.
Woo!
Yay!
True.
I read it cover to cover today.
Fantasy content all the time, James. What's going on?
See, look, I just come here to lighten up the scene. You know.
Take away his nerd card. Take it away.
You've read fantasy
no.
books
Canceled.
before.
Wait.
Canceled.
I'll reinstate my nerd card. Hold on.
This guy better have like some high quality replicas from the movies.
But okay, it's 6 o'clock. We're gonna start. They'll get here when they get here. Yeah.
You're gonna start with half the panels gone.
And one
Fuck 'em.
rummaging,
Fuck 'em.
rummaging through her
My
drawer
knitting.
or whatever.
And
Okay.
this is my bag.
A bag of holding. Okay.
Yes.
Cool. Okay, we're going live. We're going live.
All
All right.
right, let's do it.
Live.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining. This is a discussion about Lord of the Rings, racism, its influence on cultural fantasy, and I am here with a bunch of people who are like fantasy experts. I am a slight fantasy dip his toes in the water person, so if you're into that, please enjoy. If you're not, no worries. We'll be doing more political stuff tomorrow, and actual videos coming soon as well.
Literature and how it has evolved through the years, how it has influenced our culture, and how it has been influenced by our culture, by media, by politics, and how it has in turn influences those as well, both for better and for worse. We have all sorts of things to discuss. We have people from across the gamut when it comes to political opinions, and also familiarity with things like Lord of the Rings. Anyone from a person with an actual accredited degree in the subject to people who I've only skimmed it. So we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to have a great discussion and a great time. But first, before we begin, I want to give each of these lovely, wonderful, beautiful individuals a chance to introduce themselves, tell people who they are and why we should listen to them. We're gonna start with Charlie. Charlie, go ahead. Give us a rundown.
Hello, I am Charlie or Enemy Charlie. I stream, but that's not important right now. What's important is my masters, which I rarely get to use, so I'm very excited to be doing this today. But I have a Master of Letters in Fantasy Literature. At my postgraduate program at the University of Glasgow, I studied under Dimitri Fimi. She was head of my program, and she's one of the foremost Tolkien scholars in the world. Most of my research and writing has been Tolkien-based. However, I have written quite a bit on the From Software games.
Really interesting. We'll get into it. Thank you for being here. And let's pass the ball to Jeb Tan. No stranger to my channel, but it's been a minute. Jeb Tan, tell people who you are.
I'm Jeb Tan. I'm a writer. I am not a professional Tolkien scholar, but I do have Lord of the Rings wall art, so that's close, you know? So, yeah, listen to me instead of her. She's a fucking nerd.
Beautiful. Okay. I'm sure this will be a productive discussion. Next up, the multiculturalist James.
Sembino. I'm James. I'm the multiculturalist. Unfortunately, for my own life experiences, have merely skimmed The Lord of the Rings. But to my credit, I got the TTRPG versions, the fifth edition version of it, and then the One Ring version, second edition. So there's that.
Hey, Interesting. Lord of the Rings through gaming rather than the novels or the movies, in fact. Have you seen the movies at least?
I have. I've seen the extended editions.
Okay, so you've seen the movies at least. At least you understand. Okay, fair enough. We're good. We got a good baseline. Next up, finally, last but certainly not least, we have Soy Pill. Go
I was
ahead.
going to say, I thought it was least until James said he just skimmed it. I just read Fellowship today. I failed in fourth grade to get past the prologue, and now I really liked it. So I'm enjoying the book and the series, and I'm looking forward to talking about something that I do really like as a movie and its influence on the future. Also, I make political videos that have nothing to do with Lord of the Rings. So,
Or do they? Or do they? We're going to talk about it today. Okay. Well, I guess first of all, Soy Pill, you said you started reading them recently. Can you kind of talk about a little bit and tell the audience what inspired you to pick the books up, to start reading them, even though you failed to get through them when you were a little tyke.
well, see, now
Okay.
you're going to expose me as a liar because I'm actually planning a Lord of the Rings video in the future with JJ McCullough. And Charlie mentioned, like, hey, like, you don't like the books. Like, when's the last time you read them? And I was like, oh, like fourth grade. And then she's like, you should try again. And so I did. And yeah, it turns out I have much better reading comprehension than a 11-year-old. So yeah.
What do you think helped you to stick with it now that you weren't able to back in the day? Like, was it just attention
Oh,
span, or was
attention
it just
span, reading comprehension for sure. I mean, a big fault of mine is that I only read Harry Potter for about 10 years. So I got in this habit of I could know by reading the first word of any page in those books what was happening on the rest of the page. So rather than actually read them in my subsequent read throughs, I would just read the first sentence and be like, cool, I got it. I got that page. And it was kind of like recollecting the book from memory. And then that transferred into any other book, which made it so that I couldn't read very well. And that's why I got a horrible score on the SAT reading section. As an adult, having loved these movies, I rewatch them all the time, like 12-hour spans, marathons. Having that background, knowing what I'm getting into, I think really helped a lot. And also just appreciating the like politics and world building a lot more. I mean, the prologue, I could see why I didn't like it as a kid. It was this whole like, oh, and this is the mechanics of the Hobbiton, and like these are like, and they have a postman, and they go over here, and you're like, as a kid, I'm like, who gives a shit? And reading it now, I'm like, this is so cool. Like this wasn't in the movies. I want to learn more about this. So I think it's just kind of my taste has evolved as a adult consumer of fantasy.
interesting? I guess to start us off, right? Let's kind of get into some of the more controversial bits right out the gate. Charlie, racism in Lord of the Rings and fantasy. A lot of
Oh,
people have
go ahead.
levied that accusation on Tolkien, have levied that
Mhm.
accusation towards fantasy, especially older fantasy in general, that it promotes racism. You're an accredited scholar in this. Give us your opinion. Give us your thoughts. Here's the mic. Do with it as you
Okay.
will.
Prepare for a lecture. That's what this is going to turn
Oh
into.
God. Okay.
And mind you, this is not necessarily just my opinions. My goal here is to share sort of the state of the discourse on racism in fantasy among fantasy scholars, like where we
Wait,
are
fat
at,
and sassy. Am I too
essentially.
quiet? Are we too quiet? Let me know.
So,
Before you start, could I just ask, when you say a fantasy scholar, can you give us examples? Who's a fantasy scholar? Like, who do you think is a good example of this person is an expert scholar on fantasy literature?
fantasy literature at large, I would go with Brian Atterbury, Farrah Mendelssohn. But if we want to go Tolkien specific, Dimitri Fimi, Jane Chance, Helen Young.
Okay.
Those are good places to start, I think.
Fair enough. Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just very
I
curious.
can also, if you guys are interested, I can provide a reading list after this if you are interested in getting into fantasy theory, because it's very fun. Theory's fun.
Do fantasy theory. I'm very curious what that is, but we're gonna get into it. I'm gonna get into it. I've interrupted you too much already. Have the mic again.
No, it's okay. Feel free to interrupt, because this is going to turn into a lecture, and I'm very, very sorry about that. Anyway, so as we all know, J.R.R. Tolkien is the father of modern fantasy. Essentially, all fantasy tropes spring from him. Now, you said that, there are accusations of racism, as in accusations that Tolkien himself is a racist. I argue that it doesn't really matter what Tolkien's personal views were. We could discuss those at length because I know a whole lot about that as well. However, what matters is the contents of the text, what we read in it, and how it has influenced the genre. So J.R.R. Tolkien was writing at a time in which Victorian race science was kind of the prevailing belief about humanity and our species. So if you are not familiar with race science, it is essentially the belief that
My
human
viewers are
beings.
very familiar, by the way. They're
Oh,
experts, one might say. But go on.
I believe it. Yeah, technology, I'm sure. Um, Essentially, the belief that people of different races are biologically different from each other, and deeper than just like a sort of somatic features like skin color, noses, eyes, whatever. Um, but that our race, our genetics, heavily influences our character, our intelligence, our capacity for technological advancement, our morals, etc. So, an example of Victorian race science was the belief that all white people are better than everyone else, but some white people are better than others. For instance, the Anglo-Saxons were much better than the Irish or the Eastern Europeans. They were smarter, they were more logical, they were less emotional. They were creatures of the mind, not of the body. It's Victorian novels are so funny in the way that they describe the Irish. It's crazy, and that belief was kind of the justification for white people colonizing, killing people from other countries with different skin colors. So that is the era in which Tolkien was writing. And unfortunately, you can very much read this in The Lord of the Rings. For instance, um, there are three different kinds. Let's not even get into elves, dwarves, and orcs yet. Let's just talk about men. Let's talk about humans. There are, in The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien wrote first men, second men, and third men. First men, described as pale-skinned, essentially the Númenóreans and the descendants of the Númenóreans. They're smarter, taller, better than everyone. They're more advanced. Second men, kind of like the Rohirrim, still white, but like not as advanced, and not as capable of being advanced. The first men were written as being diminished by miscegenation with the second men. So they became worse because they were sleeping with
Inbreeding,
this
by the
and
way,
having
interbreeding, I should say. For those of you who don't know what miscegenation is, it means
it's
that
race
the
mixing.
Numenors slept and laid with the women's of the other tribes, right? The lesser tribes, and you got race mixing in there. But yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Yes. And then the third men, which are people with dark skin, and they are stupider, they are more violent, they are very easily corrupted, and procreating with them inevitably diminishes in spirit, intelligence, character, and capacity for evolution and etc. The offspring of a first man or a second man with a third man. So that is written into the Lord of the Rings. That is very much present there. And then more, I guess, not as specific, not as applicable to our actual, like, real life, species. Elves, dwarves, and orcs. There's a sort of Tolkien wrote a very intense biological essentialism into these races in the sense that each race has a sort of set of characteristics, has different interests, etc., etc. Orcs are, I think, very infamously known for being the most problematic in the sense that Tolkien did write them, and till the end of his days, he did not like how he wrote the orcs, because he wrote them as essentially ontologically evil. Yes, they were formerly corrupted elves, but they were evil, you know, culturally, behaviorally, down to their very bones. They were evil and bad. They also have dark skin and are described in Tolkien's words as attempting to invoke the image of the Mongol invader. So they are described multiple times as slant-eyed. They have dreaded thick hair. and they are violent and evil and brutish. The miscegenation issue comes up again because of the Tolkien describes how the descendants of orcs and men, like the humans, had become warped and twisted and even more gross and even darker in skin color and appearance by intercourse with the orcs, which was forced. So again, that has very much existed in fantasy still. It's getting a lot better, but still, even that whole premise, especially if you're like a D&D player, I'm a World of Warcraft player, and holy fuck, there's always kind of, I'll speak specifically on World of Warcraft. The depiction of orcs in WoW is a bit more nuanced. However, what you have juxtaposed with the for a long time, they could only be white. There was one dark skin color if you played a human in World of Warcraft, but you couldn't have any sort of features that weren't like very Western European, essentially. Their culture is vaguely neo-medieval European. The orcs were a unspecified amalgamation of indigenous cultures around the world. And in comparison, the orcs were much more susceptible to corruption, violence, and it is in their blood to go berserk and crazy and kill a bunch of people. And so again, while these things change, there's always going to be, and as much as I love fantasy, there's always going to be an undercurrent of like...
Is that... Yeah, no, I get what you're saying of
Yeah.
kind of like the Victorian race area thing. But I guess I want to open this up right at this point, right? And I know we can go for hours. We can go for hours on these things. But there's a couple things I want to open it up to, kind of like the class, if you will, here. To talk first about, is she correct? Do you guys agree with her assessment? I'm having seen the movies, some of you, having read the books, others of you, right?
I actually have a question, Wick. That's
go ahead,
maybe
please.
would not a direct pushback. So yeah, having seen the movies, all the age, like the first, second, third men isn't as explained. I know the like one brown guy that has any voice lines is a crazy-eyed, violent elephant rider who goes, I sure do love killing. I don't think he has a word of dialogue. So I get that. However, having just finished the book, I just read this chapter like an hour ago. When at the end of Fellowship, and I know this is not an all-encompassing knowledge, at the end of Fellowship, Gimli and the rest are are going to meet Galadriel. And they see Gimli and they're like, oh, you have a fucking dwarf in your party? Like, keep an eye on that one, because it's like very clearly they have prejudice against Gimli. But by the end of their visit to the elves in this forest, I believe like Galadriel asks Gimli like, oh, what would you have of me? And he just says like, oh, I don't need anything. Just your presence was enough. Like, this was amazing. And she's like, wow, maybe dwarfs aren't so bad. And like, it almost seemed like, especially given the context that you've just described of, hey, this was in the era of Victorian race science, that, like, it's not much considering everything else you described, but it almost seems like a progressive leaning for the time. Would that be correct to say? Or
yes, and I can actually, now we can talk about Tolkien's personal views. So Tolkien himself was, in his own words, he hated apartheid. To be fair, he was comparing apartheid in South Africa to the separation of linguistics and the study of literature, which is like, come on, dude. But he was saying that's also bad, just like apartheid, which is kind of silly. He also, pre-World War II, at a time in which, if you did not know, many white Christians in the UK and in Europe were seeing the bad things happening to the Jews in Germany and going, yeah, we get that. We don't like those guys either. Tolkien, when he was asked to speak in Germany, again, pre-World War II, he was, they asked him, like, are you Jewish, essentially? And he said, this is so corny, but it was cool for the time. He said, I don't have the privilege of being a member of that noble race. And he's like, I'm not gonna fucking speak there, fuck you guys. So personally, Tolkien, he wasn't that bad. And yes, for the time, there is absolutely a current of multiculturalism in the Lord of the Rings. And especially dwarves have some pretty heavy Jewish leanings or influences themselves. Like, their language is meant to be like Semitic. Some of their practices, like specifically mourning practices, are meant to somewhat resemble Jewish practices.
they're greedy and annoying. They complain a lot.
Okay. So they
Big
were written that
noses.
way. They were written that way in The Hobbit and partially in the Silmarillion. However, by the time Tolkien has written The Lord of the Rings, and mind you, he wrote The Lord of the Rings during World War II, and The Hobbit was written, post World War One. I can't remember.
Yeah.
During
No, it was
post
long
World War One.
beforehand, just after World War One.
Yeah. So he switched the dwarves from being inherently greedy and just really influenced by their love of jewels to essentially the dwarves tending to rock and stone and minerals the way elves do. And there's this kind of beautiful moment where you see Gimli and Legolas healing like centuries of racial prejudice between each other. And I don't know if this is, it's not spoilers. Gimli shows,
I think we're past the point of spoilers for Lord of the Rings.
Seven-year-old.
Gang, if you didn't know, Darth Vader is Luke's father. Sorry to ruin that for you, but there is a statute of limitations on spoilers, and I think we have passed this. Finish your thought, and I do want to. There's been some pushback from the chat, the super chat at me, and I want to read those, and I want to see how you respond to it. But finish your thought, please.
And so, Gimli takes Legolas to the caverns of Helm's Deeps and like points out like, oh, look at all these cool rock formations. Legolas takes Gimli to Fangorn, and they, is like, oh my god, look at all these beautiful trees. They're not that scary, right? And at the end, Gimli is the only dwarf and one of the only non-elf beings invited to Erisea. And it's because Legolas and Galadriel are like, no, wait, we really like Gimli. Let him come into the West with us, please.
One of the good ones. Okay.
He's one of the good ones.
Yeah.
No, but so
that's progressive for the time, I think, right?
Progressive for the time. Definitely better than. Well, we talked about this last night. Soy pill, H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah.
A lot could be said about H.P. Lovecraft.
Well, we'll get into it. So let me read some of these super chats. Thank you for the super chats. How I keep the light on, and if you have pushback or if you have questions, if you want comments during the show, as you get me the super chats, I'll try to get the time to read those, and we'll get through it. $2 for Slongy and Stew. We want the reading list now. We'll providing that at the end, so it's something for you to stay for. $2 more from Slongy and Stew. Get in there, Stug. We agree. $5 from Pondering Politics, saying Lord of the Rings is so good, almost on par with Harry Potter. Thank you for those $5. It's okay. $5 from Stug to say the race mixing, quote unquote, of the Gondorians with the low men, or whatever we want to call them, was quite literally the foundation of their returning strength. They didn't become worse, and Gondorians who were obsessed with a literal racial purity were the actual villains who ended up joining Sauron, and that's all I push back on for now, I guess. So thank you for that.
I can pull up some quotes for you if you would like.
I also want to jump. Can I jump in real quick?
While you look for those quotes, jump in, Jibtown.
Yeah, because I want to kind of take an overarching thing. I didn't jump in earlier because she's fleshing out sort of the scholarship of it, and I kind of want to touch on the art side of it because the art side of it is the reason why I think my gripe with two things. One, I had a gripe with the idea that it doesn't matter what his personal racial predilections were because of the work kind of standing on its own, so to speak. And two, it was a little thing, and I'm going to seem like a real nitpicky bitch, but she said fantasy has gotten better over time in terms of like the racial inclusion and things like that through more nuanced iterations like World of Warcraft and I'm sure D&D, when you brought it up, you're talking, I'm assuming, about the 2024 handbook, and it's really kind of blown things open, and there's been a lot of conversation about that. For me, the art side of it makes it a little clearer where I think it does matter that he's not racist. And I think my core point with this is just going to be that you can call back to racial stereotypes. You can even create strong moral, racial, interconnected structures in your stories as a sort of mechanism for your art, as a sort of set a framework to provide easy context so that you can talk about the stuff you really want to talk about without being racist and without the art itself being racist. What matters is the intention. And so that's why I do think it matters that Tolkien was not a racist person. So
no, he was.
Well, I'm saying not for his time a racist person.
No, he was. He was racist.
For his time, he
wasn't as bad as other people.
That's what
but
I'm
he
saying.
Was most definitely, he did believe that white people were in some capacity superior, but it was sort of a paternalistic.
That's the thing.
It's like benevolent racism, essentially.
And that's where I think we can get more into the political side of the conversation, and where I think there's differences to be had there between the type of racism that would lead to fundamentally and inherently racist work, right? That promotes and disseminates racism versus a work that can utilize some racial stereotyping as a mechanism to tell a story about things that aren't that, using that as a way to create quick context. So, an example, if I'm writing a contemporary story about daily life as it is right now, I can tell you about an Asian lawyer in San Francisco who has parents that put a lot of pressure on him. And you get that because you've lived in this world for so long. You understand the nuances of the context. You understand that I am portraying a pretty strong Asian stereotype here. An Asian guy in San Francisco, he had to go to law school because his parents pushed him into it. That's a racial stereotype. That could be racist if we're just saying that pushing in racial stereotypes are racist. And if he were to be miserable, or if he were to act out toward people around him, and I were to make him kind of an evil lawyer, and a lawyer who did bad things because of this pressure put on him by his parents,
Is there any kind? But go on.
Yeah, exactly, right? Lactoid is the only good one. He's one of the good ones. But I could make him fundamentally evil by virtue of the pressure that was put on him due to his sort of ethnic background, right? And it wouldn't be racist because there's context there, and we understand there's nuance to that context, and there's blame sharing, and it's not all on him. And when you're creating a fantasy story, Soypil just pointed out, when he was a kid, even though Lord of the Rings is written at a level that, like, teenagers can read, there's already a prologue that puts a lot of younger people and people who aren't ready to consume really thick, dense lore off immediately, because he's trying to provide a little bit of context of what these people's sort of look and spirit and background are supposed to portray to you about them and about their goals. It's not, people will call it maybe lazy. It's not lazy. It's like, it's what we need. He uses that essentialism so that we understand what all these different peoples are about, so that we can understand what pressures they're pushing against and what pressures they're falling to. You know, the reason Gimli and Legolas's connection is so important is because we know all of these sort of racially essentialist things about their backgrounds and the people that they are and the method and the things that they talk about and the things that they do. So we know the pressures they're pushing against. Same thing as the orcs, right? We could dive into some nuance of the orcs, but at the end of the day, he's like, these orcs are only doing bad things in this story. So I'm just going to make it very clear that these orcs are just bad. I want to spend more time talking about the more nuanced racial play with the party and people within the party. And so I'm going to make it a little black and white on the other side so that I don't have to dedicate that time to that side. This is where the art of it kind of comes in. And I think the delivering that information in a way that people can read. Because yes, you can make the perfect, nuanced, all-sides story, but sometimes that robs you of your ability to tell the story you wanted to tell, because it robs a lot of time from the characters that you wanted to flesh out. And you can still tell a story about multiculturalism while doing that.
I'm going to let Charlie respond, and then I know James wanted it in here. So we're going to give it to Charlie first, then give it to James.
So I am not advocating that we do not address racism in text, or that we remove any mention of racism from a text. That is, I think it's actually, I love exploring upsetting and
say you love racism
salient. You got me, Wick.
Put it on a t-shirt and send it to her, Wick.
I want the clip. Yeah. Anyway, go.
That's not what I'm advocating for. But when you present an ontologically evil group of people that is political, and Tolkien does in fact have many opportunities in which have you read the books?
Yeah.
Tolkien had ample opportunity both in The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and in his many drafts on fucking The Silmarillion and other various stories to flesh out orcs and to give them, more personhood, but it is sorely lacking. And again, when you create an ontologically evil enemy that is dark, slant-eyed, supposed to look like evil brown people in Tolkien's own words, and they are inherently evil.
Yeah.
Compared to the pale, the pale good guys. That does matter, and we see that mattering throughout the history of fantasy. A good example is what's the new? I never played it. Is it Oblivion? Is that the new remake that came out?
Yeah, the Oblivion remastered.
Oblivion, yes.
Oblivion remake, right? What is it? The Red Guard?
Red Guard are in there, yeah.
Red Guard, right? And they have less intelligence than the white races. That is the sort of
Charlie, they have the
thing.
warrior gene. You have to understand.
Is a warrior, right? Because they're so
No, but that's.
good
I
at
think it
sports
does
or whatever,
matter,
right? So but it does matter because
I
it doesn't-
agree.
Tolkien's okay. So
I just don't think it's bad.
authorial
Doesn't
intent matters kind of when you are looking at a text. However, what is more impactful is the reader's interpretation and thus the
Yes.
culture's interpretation, and that is what stays with us.
I do want to hear the quotes you had found though, because the stud guy in my chat is saying you're just inaccurate. You're just wrong.
About
Well, tell the
what?
stud guy to
First
join the
section
fucking
thing.
panel so he can give
Yeah,
her
Stug,
lip,
if you wanna
because I
jump
think
in,
we're
jump
having a
in.
good conversation. I don't want to bog her down with finding sources for someone who's not on the panel. I think we're having a good conversation. I agree that it matters,
Can I-
right? But I actually think Oblivion's a great example. I don't think it's bad. Like, I don't think we don't have this crazy outcry about the Red Guard right now, even though there are a lot of black players of the Elder Scrolls games, because it's not that big of a deal. Black people in anime are depicted almost exclusively as big, hulking, bald fighter dudes. And black people fucking love anime. There are some things where there are stereotypes that you can lean into in a way that, in the context of a story that does preach multiculturalism in other areas, where I think you can create a fiction that doesn't harm, and you can just use those things as a way to bring in more diversity. Because at the end of the day, if they just made the Red Guard just like the white Imperials, why do I have two races? Why not just have Imperials be able to be dark? Which they can, by the way. You can make Imperials dark too. But it's like, why not give them a race of their own that has its own strengths and weaknesses, just like all of the other variety of the other races, and accept we're building a fantasy world. This is Magic and Dragons. This is not me saying that this is how the world ought to be or how we ought to see human beings. I'm just trying to give you a variety of backgrounds and people to choose from that sort of have an aim and have a goal, and from a gaming perspective, have like a build priority.
Yeah, Jeb, you're bearing
while
the
providing
lead, though.
racial diversity.
You're bearing the lead.
I'm not at all.
No, you're Jeb. No, wait. I have to, because he just went on a very
I
silly rant.
understand,
I
but
want to jump
before you
in
do
here.
that, just housekeeping. Charlie, you got to turn on shared chat. Our chats are not.
How do I do that?
There's a setting that you choose, and you
just do it.
Yeah,
you
just do it. Apparently.
I don't know what to tell
Yeah.
you.
Thanks,
I don't know.
Wick.
But anyway,
Okay,
Are
wait,
we
no.
Are we in the thing? We're streaming
we're in
together,
the
right?
thing. We're streaming together, but it's the
The
chats are
shared
not
chat, I
shared.
think, is
Just
another
tell
setting.
your
But what
chats
lead did I
open
bury,
to-
Soypill?
The lead that you
Anyway.
buried is that
Beat me up.
you're promoting this very, I think, reasonable position of, hey, a world can pursue and explore the ideas of multiculturalism and fighting and themes that might reflect our world. And I agree with that. I think that fantasy is a perfect outlet of that. And I think the one example you brought up of Gimli and Legolas is a good example of saying, oh, look, how do these races interact? They have prejudices and they become friends through the course of the series. Actually, for some reason in the book, they're already friends by the end of the first one. It's very explicitly said. Did not know that was going to happen. But that is very different from saying, let's make a race of people that are exclusively dark and stupider than all the white people and say that these two things are the same. You're very much conflating like one, which is, I think, probably a pretty harmful
No, I'm not
stereotype.
conflating. I'm saying they can exist together. And the story
Well, they do.
as a holistic Yes, that's my that's
right,
my
but
point,
I'm saying that's
is
bad.
when for some
I don't think
reason,
you should make all
it's
the
not,
dark
though.
people stupid. I think that's
It's
probably
not
not a good
always
thing to do.
it's
is.
not always bad. That's the thing, is we have
is
all
bad
these
because
beloved fantasy that don't promote racism, that don't make people more racist, and somehow these themes exist to them because people understand this is the magic and dragons world, and the point of this story is one of sort of unification and multiculturalism. It just also has this element
Yeah,
that is
also,
not
just
used
all
to
the black
promote.
people are dumber. That you have to
They're
like put
not
a little
okay.
asterisk at the end of every good thing you say
Not
about
all
this,
the
by
black,
the way.
not all the black people are dumber.
In Oblivion, apparently Red Guards just
No, they're
inherently
not,
have
because
lower
Imperials
intelligence.
Imperials can be dark. Dark elves are one of the smartest races in the game, and there's a lot of under racism toward them. Like, again, you guys are looking. I understand from a scholarly perspective, it's important to critique individual things, and that's a really valuable thing because you can't have the holistic conversation until you've critiqued every individual thing. But when we step back, we look at the art and we look at it as a whole. I don't think people watch Lord of the Rings and come away with this idea of, yep, that's, you know what I got from that? Dark people are fucking
Well,
idiots
that's because
that
there's no
love
black
killing.
people in
You
Lord of the
know,
Rings,
it's
so they
like,
don't think anything about
people
black
did.
people.
Actually, there were reviews written by black viewers of Lord of the Rings that said, okay, the only people that looked like me were the evil orcs, and the evil men, and that was it. And again, that is kind of the
yeah,
issue
there
with
are
fantasy as a
reviews
whole, is that
of everything like that. Sure.
fantasy fans and scholars that are people of color have routinely said fantasy as a genre, compared to sci-fi especially, very unwelcoming to people of color, because again, the tradition in the fantasy genre is a neo-medieval setting in Europe, which is due to our cultural perceptions of medieval Europe, is that everyone was white, had the same beliefs about race as we do. Men were men and women were women, and no one ever traveled anywhere, and it was just, it's like,
Yeah, no,
and
I
then
understand that. Yeah.
so again, it does matter in the sense that fantasy is incredibly unwelcoming to people that are not white. It's alienating.
And
It is
Jeff,
alienating to
I
not
think-
only not see yourself, but to to see yourself as the enemy, and to only
Kind
have the
of,
perspective
sure.
of the white European protagonist,
and
essentially.
in a context, again, in a holistic context of an early to mid 1900s fantasy, or even late 1900s fantasy landscape that didn't have a lot of stories that centered around people of color, I totally understand that that as a holistic landscape would be off-putting to people. But what I'm saying is there are examples of art that is not off-putting to people of color. Again, you can say there were reviews that said that. There were reviews that say a great many things about a great many things. At the end of the day, Lord of the Rings is one of the most successful fantasy franchises of all time, including among people of color.
Jeb, did you see the
And
reactions
it has
to the
the
Ring
exact
of Power when they had a
stereotype.
black dwarf and a black elf? Like, did you
Again, I'm not saying.
And you say it
again,
doesn't make people more
You guys are
racist?
talking about, yes. When you go on
Okay,
the internet,
so-
you can find tribes of people that give a fuck about a lot of shit, about essentializing a lot of shit, and they want some things essentialized, and some people really don't want things essentialized. I could say the same thing, but the opposite. But every time there's a fucking outcry about a character that was a certain race in a book, and then they cast someone of a different race, or someone who was crippled in a book and they had a non-crippled person play the cripple, or someone
Wait.
who's trans and they had a non-trans person play the trans person.
Jeb, I'll say one
But
last
I'm
thing.
not going to say
I'll say-
that every person of every trans person is someone assaulting every art they see and saying, if that trans character is not really trans, I hate it.
Well,
I know a lot of
right.
trans people that love Dallas Buyers Club, and they love the fucking one that the guy from Fantastic Beasts was in. They have no problem with it. Same
give it-
way that I don't think all people of color think it's awful that there are dark bad people in some
I do
of
want
the
to get
movies.
James in here. James has been very, very polite and very
Mhm.
kind and hasn't said anything. And I want to give James a chance to say something. Go ahead, James.
But thank you. I'm going to say something. First of all, Josiah, I think it's interesting that D&D was also inspired by Lord of the Rings. And in this book that I reviewed on my YouTube channel, you can go visit the Multicultural. Dragon magic actually is all about a Harry Potter-styled school that you can actually level up through dragons. So there's a little bit of a tidbit for the Harry Potter side. Just wanted to give you. In any case, besides that, I think one of the things I want to approach with this is probably maybe something that's like of a bridge building thing. Like one of the things that I find very contentious is terminology in this. like one of the things that 2024 D&D rulebooks or the core books have done is that they don't say race anymore. They say species.
Species, yeah.
And other TTRPGs that are fantasy based have done this in turn as well. They either say ancestry, heritage, or sometimes lineage. They go away from the word race. Can we agree that the use of the word race in this context has a very abstract use, and it seems to go in and out of these types of definitions that we're familiar with?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I agree, but I'm not sure I understand fully what you're saying. So sure, for the purpose of the conversation.
Okay. Well, basically, where I was like, if I'm talking about race in fantasy, I'm never talking about like humans, but specifically different skin color
Oh, sure.
human.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So yeah, if you're a dragonborn or something like that, that's completely different. Yeah.
Right, of course, but there's still also the I think it would be hard to argue that, again, let's turn to World of Warcraft. The humans clearly have like a European medieval influence in their architecture, armor, culture. The orcs have a non-specified indigenous kind of all over the place culture, but non-specific, but certainly not white. The Tauren are like vaguely North American indigenous, and the Trolls are vaguely Jamaican. So even if they are different species, there are certain races in D&D that are coded in a specific way to invoke, real life cultures in our own world, and that can be done in a cool way.
Yeah.
Can also be done in a bad way.
Sure. Things that I can agree with, the point that you're making here. I didn't really even think about it, but I read this in an article somewhere that was talking about, okay, well, when you think of the word dwarf, how often do you think of some version of a Scottish accent?
Frequently,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
That stereotype is proliferated, yes.
That's right. Like, it never occurred to me like a different accent. Like if there's a Mongolian accent, or if there's a whatever accent. So I agree. That's part of the, I think, around the softened edges of trying to figure out where these areas lie. That probably does make it complicated. But like you said, it is there. So I think it's always fair to address it.
Yeah, and I think we all agree that it's good to address it. I think I think that there are ways to address it in a way that is very heavily stereotypical, very black and white, and even makes one race the bad guy. And the art as a holistic piece of work can still be 100% a net positive. And it's a great thing, and I wouldn't change that part of it. I guess would be my additional modifier that they would disagree
Jeb,
with.
I don't disagree.
I wouldn't
with that,
change the orcs in Lord of the Rings.
Insofar as like, yeah, if you look at like Kingdom Hearts, and it's like, oh, it's these darkness creatures, and people might be like, oh, is that black people? But they are like ontologically evil. It's the darkness, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with that, and I actually do kind of like the concept of, oh, these orcs aren't like a race of people that live and have shops and have families, but it's like, oh, they were raised from the muck of goo and they were corrupted, and it's just like this. Oh, they're ontologically evil. Sure, that concept is fine. I'm not arguing against that. But again, this is why I feel like you're bearing the lead. It's like, yeah, that's fine. But if you're saying, by the way, they all look exactly the same of like this one specific race that reflects reality.
No, I'm not bearing that lead. I bit the bullet immediately.
Right.
Like,
what I'm saying is,
we're
not describing it that time. And I guess that's like the discussion.
We
was described by Charlie. I don't want to like be redundant to what she already just described.
This is kind of like my thoughts on these things, right? And I do want to jump in here for a little. I think that we are all tired. When I say we are all tired, a lot of the people who consume a lot of fantasy literature, who consume a lot of fantasy gaming, who consume a lot of video games and things like that, we're tired of inserts. And so what I mean by that is when it's obvious that the story you're playing is, oh, the evil guy is building a wall to keep out the minorities, and he's I don't know, breaking the law, and he's this giant orange creature, right? We all know what's being said here. It's kind of silly, right?
Yeah.
If again, as many fantasy authors have done, and other authors, right, have done, they insert real life races, real life cultures, and then twist them just enough so what's being referred to, right? They're using like Mongolians,
Yeah.
to help you understand, right? To help the reader understand. And then they're all bad. It would be like the modern equivalent of someone, if Tolkien were writing today, and he wrote the orcs as these orange creatures who loved grifting, who had to live all in gold, who would just go around and like oppress immigrants and things like that, we would all understand. Okay, come on, that's silly.
Well, hold on.
right?
Let me challenge this immediately.
Please.
How many shows have you seen with an autocratic governmental group of white, blonde, blue-eyed men wearing very square, gray, muted military outfits with bright-colored armbands that aren't Nazis? How many times have we seen that? And you don't get tired of it. You don't get tired of it, right?
I do. I do.
Okay, but it's done a million times. But
Fascist
Tolkien
regimes are kind of throughout history. They occur fairly frequently.
So did at that time barbaric horse riding tribes of murderers. They came in all shapes, colors, and sizes.
Evil? Were they ontologically evil?
The Mongols, certainly, yeah. Certainly were
the Mongols as a whole were ontologically evil.
I
mean, not
ontologically. Ontologically evil.
Not all Nazis were ontologically evil, but hold on, stop. Now we're burying leads.
Nazi isn't a race.
No, that's
okay.
It's an ideology,
hold on.
man.
Germans at the time, if I were to invoke... hold on. The Mongol steppe riders that he was specifically referring to also weren't a race.
Okay, but you said Mongols.
But the fact
if you want to talk about people that pillage are bad.
Listen, the same thing with all these non-Nazi Nazi groups of people have blonde hair and blue eyes. You didn't necessarily have to have blonde hair and...
group?
Huh?
Like the Imperials.
What do you mean?
The Imperials are heavily
in all of these artworks that I've told
white
you about.
British
yes.
men, which not Germans, but
you just agreed with me. You've seen it in millions of different stories. Non-Nazi Nazis.
You insofar as you can reflect a group in the past as take homage from the imagery.
Give me space. Give me space to make this point before. Yes, but the thing is, you differentiate the group and the race when you're talking about Nazis. But you can't differentiate the group and the race when you're talking about Mongols. When you specifically talk about Mongol steppe riders under Genghis Khan.
Yes, Mongols were ontologically evil.
No, I'm saying his parallel of the Mongols in the story are ontologically evil.
Can we talk about this?
Yes, but let me finish the point and then we can talk about it because I'm not fucking done. Because I've been interrupted 7 times. It gets done so much quicker when I'm not. So... in the same way that I can have all my non-Nazi Nazis that are very clearly invoking Nazis, that are very clearly German-looking Nazis, and not be trying to perpetuate racism toward Germans, I can have the everything but Mongols. I can't believe it's not Mongols, specifically referring to steppe Mongols that murder, raped, and pillaged a larger portion of the world than any other group on the planet, and make them ontologically evil in my story without declaring that Mongols themselves are ontologically evil now. I'm saying those steppe riders, though, I'm invoking the fear and the rage you have at that specific group of those people.
Yeah, and if there was
just
never,
like I can
ever
invoke
any
the
other
rage
part
and fear
of that,
you have on Nazis.
And if there was never any depiction of that group doing anything other than being evil, would you not say that regardless of your intent, if you were just trying to evoke that group, that somehow people might take away that, like, yeah, this is a little weird. Like if you watch Star Wars, you would take away that all white British accented people are bad because you've got Princess Leia on one side, you've got, all these people on the Rebels, so that's not about it. But when it's a race of, hey, every dark-skinned person in this entire 12 hours of movie is an evil, warmongering, screaming, radical, crazy, psychopathic, like, murderer, doesn't that maybe say that even if you didn't intend it, you're going to leave your audience with some sort of depiction of racism because you're playing off of that stereotype? No. And by the way, the stereotype that you introduced at the beginning was the, one positive stereotype race that people usually use, which is, oh, Asians are smart.
No, I was not using a positive stereotype. That's the thing is you've decided that it's a positive stereotype. I didn't say he was smart once.
So two things.
You stereotyped him as smart.
Sorry, I'm racist against Asians.
Two things. This comes from my friend who has a PhD in German history and is German herself.
Sure.
So again, she has spent her life dealing with, German history, both personally and professionally. Fascist aesthetics represent ideology versus the aesthetics of how an orc is depicted ends up depicting a racist trope. So again, when the orcs are described, again, slant-eyed, dark skin, universally dangerous, because they are born evil. That invokes racist stereotypes. 2, in Italy, fantasy is considered, and I had one of the people in my program she was from Italy. She explained to me, fantasy is the genre of fascists. The very far
You're
right
burying the
parties
lead. That
in
could have
Italy.
been the title for today's show. Fantasy is the genre of fascists. Explain.
been heavy.
Okay,
Elaborate.
Changing my stream
explain.
title right now.
So
That would've gone
fantasy
hard.
is the genre of I know, I'm sorry. But it's true, because again, what the far right party in Italy is very pro Lord of the Rings, and many Nazis, outright white supremacists, people who down to their bones, and I have spoken to these people, I assure you, as someone who does a lot with Tolkien, I have unfortunately encountered these people a lot. Many hardcore white supremacists believe all white people are better. They love the image of the invading Mongol hordes. They love that the orcs are evil. They love that the third men are all evil and stupid, because it reflects their belief in all black and brown people are evil. They're invading us. They want to kill us, and we have to protect our pure whiteness from them, from miscegenation and being taken over. So again, like Nazi imagery, well, we understand that universally as an ideology that is fascist. It's but ideologically, again, based in race, because that was the whole thing about it, was some people are better on the basis of their skin color. But again, that doesn't really have real world consequences beyond people going, oh yeah, Nazis were pretty bad, huh? Versus white supremacists looking at orcs and the third men and going, yeah, Tolkien really hated them, just like me. Yeah.
Well, to be fair,
and
hold on.
you can weaponize.
If I may stop, please, because to be fair, it isn't just far right fascists and stuff who use orcs in their imagery. Look at Ukraine, for example. Ukraine is calling the Russian invaders orcs and things like that.
Yeah.
Other groups, other than far rights, other than fascists, other than people on the right, use, and this is part of, it goes into the topic of how fantasy has influenced our culture, right? Our culture uses orcs as a shorthand to describe someone who is bad. And this has gone far
Never
beyond
heard that
race
happen with
things,
Nazi
right?
eitdo I've never heard that happen with a Nazi. That
What
doesn't
do you
happen
mean?
with it. What I'm saying is, you guys are
Well,
okay
Nazis
with the same
were
practice.
real. Okay, so Nazis are
Yeah,
real.
but the people
Do
they're
you
calling
know
Nazis
that the
are
Holocaust
not.
happened?
Yeah, certainly. And if I were to
Okay.
write a fantasy story that closely paralleled the Holocaust, it wouldn't all of a sudden become racist because I'm racially essentializing all the Germans at that time as Nazis, because I would be using it for a purpose, the same way that telling the story of Lord of the Rings was done for a purpose. And
Right,
you're not
but
looking
would
at
you
the
have a
point of
fantasy? Would you have a
and
fantasy?
inaccurate, though.
Yeah, but would you have a fantasy parallel of Oskar Schindler that is like a good German Nazi who's helping them out, or would they all be evil, like ontologically?
It depends what the story's about. Probably if I'm telling... No, stop interrupting me and saying right, because you don't know what I'm going to say. If I'm telling a story about a very specific fellowship of people who were fighting against the Nazis, and I wanted to write a dense fucking series of books about that group of people, I'm probably not going to get into Schindler.
Okay,
I'm probably not going to make a
fantasy
Schindler.
is-
I'm probably just going to have the Nazis be bad so I can tell my story about my fellowship of anti-Nazis.
And fantasy is not a specific story honing on a specific group of people. Lord of the Rings, especially,
It can be, though.
But
You don't get to decide that.
Well, okay, but we're talking about examples that are clearly a world-building exercise where there is a wider world, and we do know, the entirety of the behavior of the races depicted in these worlds because we, or at least some of us, have read
and
the
it is
totality
all the
of
same
those
as the
things.
orcs, essentially. It is almost all pretty black and white. This is how these people are born. This is to create context in a way that is simple, digestible. Okay, you get who these people are and where they come from, now go.
Right, and we're saying,
That's the
depending on
I would say
how you
that
do that, it could be bad.
I would say that universally
not
in
bad.
literature on the Holocaust and discussing World War II, I'm thinking Boy in the Striped Pajamas, like Anne Frank. Universally, there were always
And Frank
some
was real,
good...
too, so...
my
thing
I'm
is,
talking about literature. Yes, it's a.
Yes.
They're
They're writing stories about the
Holocaust
nuanced person, though.
Yeah,
Not
so
the
universally, both in
pseudo-Holocaust
fiction-
scenarios.
So both in fiction and reality surrounding World War II, and genocide, there always seems to be at least a couple of Germans that are decent people and against it, and that's responsible because it's not good to put an entire group of people in a box and depict them as all
It's not
evil.
Good. It can be
And bad
fine.
writing, creating an ontologically evil group of people based on their racial characteristics or their somatic characteristics is bad writing.
It's not.
I would read that, and I would read that, and fellow fantasy scholars would read that and go, damn, this is dog shit.
Sure,
Toss
and
it.
fellow
Maybe-
fantasy scholars would be 1% of their potential market share, and they'd miss out on that 1%, and then the 99% would explode it with joy because even you fantasy scholars, love these books that do it. The Lord of the Rings books, the most successful books. We're talking about the most successful fantasy franchise of all time, and you're saying that's bad writing. We would hate it. You got a master's degree in it. So you didn't hate
I got
it.
a master's.
You didn't
He's
put it
the
off as bad
He's
writing.
He's the father of modern fantasy. And again, he was writing at a time in which
was he a bad writer?
Shut the fuck up. Those were the beliefs at the time.
Okay, was he a bad writer?
No, he's a fantastic writer. Shut
Okay, then
shut
it's not
up.
bad
Shut
writing.
your fucking mouth. Shut up. Listen to me.
He's a fine writer.
Listen to me. Listen to me. The thing about writing and genres is that we should take what our predecessors did and make it fucking better.
Not always.
If Tolkien wrote, shut up. If Tolkien wrote
it's art.
today,
It's not science. We're not
You,
always
okay,
trying
hold
to
on,
iterate and
Jeb10,
improve.
you can play. Hold on, stop. Both of you stop. Jeb10, you went on a rant about how you were these people are interrupting me constantly, and you haven't let her gotten out 10 seconds.
Well, because she had
right?
a
You can't
lecture
stop.
for 30 minutes to start the whole show.
yeah, because
I didn't get that.
you cunt. You're just a guy.
Wait, I want to ask
You
a
are just
question.
a fan.
Jeb-
I'm sorry,
Jeb,
but
do you like
I'm
the
allowed
movie?
to lecture.
Do you like the movie Bright, Jeb? Do you think that was well written?
I did not. Was that the Will Smith one, the Netflix
Yeah.
one? I did not watch that show.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
All right.
Or movie. I don't know which one it was.
Damn. Trap avoided. Okay.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to avoid the trap. I would give you an honest answer about ones that I like ones with nuanced Schindler type characters. I like ones without. This is one of the things I knew I was going to have to differentiate here is, again, from the scholarly perspective, there's this idea that like she said, art, the point of writing is blank. That is a mythological concept, that there is a point of writing. Like, people talk to me because my girlfriend exclusively reads modern women's fantasy smut fiction, and they're like, "Oh, isn't that awful?" I'm like, "No,
completely cut out for me, but I
because
can
there's
see
a
that you
point
guys
to
still
writing
hear
that.
it. Oh,
There
thank
is
you.
a different point to writing Lord of the Rings, and there's a different point to writing a fucking Pac-Man game. Like,
And this is unfortunately
there's
why
no point
fantasy
to
is
writing.
not taken seriously in academia. Unfortunately, this is why, because it is considered slop for the masses among literary scholars. Fantasy is considered slop for the masses because it is so frequently written to appeal to small-brained little morons who don't want nuance. And I would love for you to tell me what
That's
fantasy
fine.
media,
Write a better
what
one.
fantasy media in the last 10 years has been successful while depicting a race of people as ontologically evil.
I don't know. I don't know if it would appeal to as big of a market now. I don't know if it would invoke the same things because
insane.
Well, you
That's
said
crazy.
99% of people would
Oh
buy
my
it. It'd be
God.
amazingly successful.
Yeah,
What do you
it'd be
mean?
amazing, dude.
just said it would be
Well, hold
amazing.
on. I said 99% of their market share would not be scholarly individuals. So you're just lying about what I said. And
Oh,
two,
no, I misunderstood. That
I
wasn't
made
a lie.
I made it clear. That's the point. Was what I was saying is it matters if he's racist or not, and if his intention is racist. Because if what his intention simply was to invoke a context that his readers would understand in order to make the literature, to make his art accessible to the people that he wanted to read it, then it's okay. The reason it wouldn't do as well now is we're not just off the back of any of those types of conflicts in America, and so you wouldn't be invoking as strong a context. That's why we constantly use Nazis, is because in the political world nowadays, we're constantly throwing Nazi, 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 so we still see a ton of super Nazi-like fascist regimes in like half the fucking new shows and art that we get fed, because it does still invoke that concept. But if someone tried to invoke, parading Mongol hordes killing and raping right now that are ontologically evil, it wouldn't invoke as much of that fear and rage from us now because we're not so closely tied to people who experienced that.
Well,
Whereas
Tolkien didn't live through
then
that
they
either.
were. He didn't live through it, but he was in a world that had more recently experienced the history of it.
No, I
Yes.
don't understand. I don't think you know when like the like the Genghis
No,
Khan came.
I know when it happened. What I'm saying is,
he didn't live through that. His grandparents
he lived through
didn't live
hold on.
His
He lived
grandparents'
through
grandparents didn't live
He
through
lived
that.
through the strongest, like the biggest increase in historical uncovering of what happened during that time. Yes. Mongol history of that time was built and developed and studied a ton more. There was a bigger jump in historical awareness of that time when he was alive than ever before. So it's still, again, just like we didn't just live with the Nazis, but we're constantly reminded, we're constantly made aware, and there's an oversaturation of that context in our lives, and so it is still effective in
invoking alive
it.
today that lived through it, which is very different than Mongol hordes that were studying from hundreds of years
I don't
ago.
have any living family members that were victims of Nazis, but it is still an effective invocation. It is still an effective invocation of emotion from me in art, because I am often faced with the problem of Nazis through history and through art.
Would you
now
say...
we are not super densely commonly facing the problem of Mongols in our art and in our media right now, and so it wouldn't be as effective an invocation as it was then.
But do you
it
think
was
it
a very effective invocation then, obviously, because
Tolkien
it worked.
Tolkien was a medievalist, and he.
Well,
ahead,
okay, wait.
Like
maybe...
this was not.
Go ahead, give it to Charlie. Go ahead.
I don't even want to talk about it.
Well, Jeb, I mean, if anything, I feel like you could kind of apply what you're saying to what we're saying, which is, yeah, maybe this was effective in his day as part of his writing, but looking back on that and how fantasy has evolved, we can say, yeah, it's good when we don't do that. Like when we depict an entire race as
it can
bad.
be good when we do. It can be good when we do. It can be good when we don't.
But you can't even think of a single example of it being good in the past 10 years.
I can. Lord of the Rings.
No, Charlie asked you, what's a recent example of fantasy writing that does what you're describing as a good thing? If
Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition.
Is that recent? I don't know.
Is that the most recent edition, or did they get rid of it because people didn't like it? Yeah, they got rid of it.
Not because people didn't like that orcs were bad. People wanted a more streamlined TTRPG system. Now you're just a fan. Don't get into what I'm expert in after bickering at me for talking about what you're expert in.
Well, are races
people didn't get rid of 4th edition because of
orcs. You didn't study this at university, so you're not an expert in it. You are a fan.
Yeah.
And you're going to remain a fan.
I've studied almost every text. I've studied every 4th edition text published by the official 4th edition purveyors of that technology.
What I'm saying is you're not involved in the scholarship. You're not involved in the academic world. And there are people who are
talking about art,
Dungeons and Dragons. So again, you're a fan.
But we're skipping over the point.
You're an enthusiast. That's great, man. But you're a fan.
We're skipping over
what
the point.
What am I wrong about?
Are orcs ontologically evil in 4E?
Stop.
That's the whole point I've
Charlie, no, stop. Charlie.
James is raising his hand. He's being nice.
Am I wrong that 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons was not changed solely to make orcs good?
Of course not. A lot of
did 5th edition even make orcs less bad?
I think they made them slightly less shitty, but in a way in which it was religion based. However, Oh, okay. What did they do to orcs?
You're wrong.
Enlighten
me. They
me.
didn't touch them between 4th edition and 5th edition. It wasn't about changing the species. Between 5th edition 2014 and 5th edition 2024, they started changing the race and the species thing. That was very recent.
Recently changed it. Right. So they
And which one's more popular? Which do more gamers play with?
Well, I'm playing 5e right now. However, we are going to transition to the newer edition, the 2024 one.
Yeah, that's still 5e, but the more
just came out.
Most people are continuing to play with the 2014 because their main they already worked through the racial inequity issue. If it was an issue at their table, they dealt with it at their table. Huh?
What's the percentage that's still playing?
I don't know about raw percentage, but I know sales have been pretty slow for the player's handbook of
this is beyond the entire point. Can you not take an orc and be a good person? Isn't that kind of defeating the entire point of why I brought up Dungeons and Dragons as not an example of depicting an entire race as ontologically evil? Isn't this kind of undermining the entire point of what we're talking about?
Well, no, because it's making my point that you can depict them as that, and then the people enjoying your art can not take that away from
Are
you.
orcs just in lore ontologically evil in Dungeons and Dragons?
You could not play as an orc because it was a beast. It was not a playable race.
In 4E?
Again, is that
in 4th? No, you couldn't.
And the most recent editions don't make them that bad. Is that
does
correct?
newer just mean it's better? It was less adopted. People liked it less. That was not one of the improvements in the 2024 handbook. It's cool. I use the 2024 handbook. I don't mind that at all.
On how many people play the 2024 handbook?
Yes, we have
versus the
stats on this.
2014?
We have stats on the sales, and the sales I think were like half as fast, even though D&D has gotten exponentially more popular.
But do we have
So
stats on the
you
racism
can
of the
pirate
player base?
the books
That's
online.
different.
You can pirate
Yeah, you could pirate them then too. So that's not
and
a
I think everyone
valuable
pulls
excuse.
up everyone pulls up the. All I'm saying is, I think
They
people
pulled up
weren't
the
as good at that
PDFs back in the
2014.
2014 one as well. That's the thing.
I will
So
say-
it's
James
like,
talk.
Okay, let's give it to James. Let's give it to James. He's been
yeah,
good.
go to James.
ahead,
He's a TTRPG more expert than me.
Thanks. There are two things that I wanted to add to the conversation, both for and against what was being said. But for the 2014 to the 2024 thing, I wouldn't rely on that too much. It's usually this. From Professor Dungeon Master, from what he said, he's a guy who's done all the old school stuff. So the transition from 1 to 2, it was slow, but eventually you just had more products and people kept buying the new thing. So it's just going to naturally migrate over to the new product, whatever it is. To the whole point about I guess you could say low information context scenarios, whether it's a fantasy genre or even if you're then having something like racially coding something in it. I understand the idea of like wanting to have some version of a representation of an aspect of the culture. The problem is that, as I put it to myself usually these days, that usually comes with a period.
Mm-hmm.
There's no comma, there's no second sentence, that's it. And it can be inferred or implied that there's more than that, but for people who are then just digesting that kind of media, it doesn't necessarily get communicated that way. It's not necessarily translated that way. So that's one of the issues from there. Like, one of the things that you can say in terms of the word orc being something that just simply means ugly, a really good friend of mine actually was telling me that she had heard a new Mongol word, and it's orc. She orc. You're an orc, and it means you're ugly. But to that same point, if all I heard was that the inspiration for this group of this essentially species, more or less, that was supposed to be inspired Mongolian in some respect. I understand the whole point about the Mongolian horde, the Chinggis Khan horde. But if that's it, I really would worry about people extrapolating that to the entirety of the group. Because there's no extra sentence, there's no comma. That's it. So that's one of the things that I think needs to be aware of. To the point, though, about starting with some version of bad, let's say, semiotics, right? Some version of bad symbolism that we have. I talked with you about this, Wick, a while back. The word barbarian. Do you remember that one?
Vaguely. Remind the audience.
Okay. So it was interesting because I heard that there was some issue with the word barbarian, and I didn't really know what was going on with it. But then if you go through the etymology of its origins, barbarian comes from barbar, comes from the word Berber, and Berber referring to Amazigh people, which are North African Muslim. And that apparently where that title comes from isn't from a native place. It's not from the civilization itself. It's apparently originating from Roman civilization being put onto them. Now, at that time, I would say that that's an offense. This is not something that they would be recognized as because they're not saying it for themselves. Another group is then putting it on them. How is this just? How is this considerate? Right? The thing is, over time, there's just no connection in my mind, and I think almost anybody's mind, with the word barbarian and North African Muslim. So, do we change the word barbarian, or do we work with what it is at this point? So these are just considerations that I throw out there.
Yeah, and I think awareness is important, and giving validation to people who do have a problem with it. If someone watched Lord of the Rings was like, man, I don't feel very spoken to by that art, I'd be like, hey man, I get it. I totally understand why. I'm not then going to just say that's bad writing now, no one should ever do it again. I'm saying if you're trying to reach that audience, if you're specifically trying to make like a racially inclusive, or especially a fantasy that speaks to, I guess, Mongolian people, because the movies are the reason why black people because the movies obviously didn't make them look Mongolian. They just look like kind of leathery monsters. But I guess they're darker skinned. So I would say, to that black person, I would say maybe don't compare yourself to leathery monsters because they're not They're the least
Tell the
humanoid.
black people in my
Vibe and Lamp,
audience
thank you
more
for the
what they should feel and
$2.
think. Go ahead.
He has not taken the
I
soy
mean,
pill, and if
you
I had to
can
guess, he
definitely
is a
give people advice on how to
crypto-racist,
interact with things
100%.
in order to, enjoy them more. Just like I would say, men don't compare yourself to the dumb dad in all the sitcoms, and you'll like them a lot more because they're not saying all men are dumb. They're just trying to make sort of heartwarming, funny situations.
But notice how you
I
keep
would
using
say,
examples that are like a
don't.
family and not a world of people. Like, that's kind of a different thing. That's
Not
what
a
we're
whole
talking
group
about.
of people.
I mean,
Like, if you're complaining about, oh, there's one black guy in this and he's a bad guy, I don't like that. Yeah, I think that's a little silly.
Okay.
If it's, hey, every black person is reflective of black stereotypes and they're all evil, like, yeah, I think you can have a pretty big issue with that now.
What I'm saying is, they're not black people. They're monster people.
Oh, okay.
They're not given like human black skin. They're given like marred and tarred, burned monster skin from being in these egg sacs in the movies again. 'Cause they weren't written that way. They were written like Mongols. So we agree that, it's just straight up inaccurate to say it was against black people.
Sure,
What I'm
sorry.
saying is, the core point that you guys are trying to obfuscate from is, I would never have a problem with an individual saying that art doesn't speak to me. The problem
no.
is
We lost it, gang.
deciding for ourselves that art and writing always has to have one mission, and that mission is to iterate and get better and better and better to appease the scholars. Like, that's always the goal. No, different art has different intention, but we're not even on Wix stream anymore because I think he lost his internet.
That's
So-
fine. We can say
Oh,
source.
Jesus.
No,
I'm down.
No,
I
I'm
don't care
streaming.
about
I'm
where they come
streaming.
from.
No.
We're not.
No, I'm not
saying
gonna- I wasn't
that
gonna
it
care,
has
but I
to
was just-
strive towards a progressive ideal, and this corruption of art must always progress, and we can never ever depict it that way. We're just saying, hey, I think it's a
she
good.
did, but
Well, I don't think you're understanding what either of our arguments are, and they're very overlapping. And it's that, hey, when you depict an entire race of people this way, not, hey, you have the exclusive characters who are that race this way, but an entire race that draws on the stereotypes of real life, you are doing harm to that race
She said literally the point of writing is to take what people did before and make it better.
I mean, yes,
That's
but
what-
that's
verbatim.
Not. That's not.
And I
what she
think that
said.
if J.R.R.
Let's let
Tolkien
Charlie say,
himself
go ahead.
says, if J.R.R. Tolkien himself is unhappy with how he wrote orcs, I feel, as someone who loves Tolkien, the most out of everyone on this panel, I'm gonna say that I put myself $80,000 in debt to the U.S. government because I love Tolkien. If he said, "Damn, I really hate how I wrote orcs, and I wish I'd done them more justice," well, you know what we can fucking do. Is we can do them more justice. And on to
If you want,
James's
I
point.
disagree with that.
Let
point. I
her
think,
finish. Let her finish.
well,
If
she's
you
making a
can't-
separate.
Jet
She's
in,
making a separate point, retard. She's
I'll beat you.
Hey, don't! Why are you dropping the?
If you can't
Okay.
if you can't go 10 seconds without inserting yourself, it's gonna be a problem. Charlie, finish.
Yeah. So, and on to James's point. I agree with you on, the barbarian, like the etymology of that word. That is so far in the past that it's like, well, the content. When we say barbarian, God, I think of a Viking. That is the image that comes to mind. The word, the context of the word has changed. In our culture. However, to my point about orcs, while Tolkien may have been for those orcs specifically, when I picture them, I picture the Mongol hordes. Orcs, as a trope in fantasy media, have for many people come to represent the dark-skinned, uncivilized, non-specifically non-white hordes, which is, even when we try to do that responsibly, that is the image that is invoked. Like Wick said, the Ukrainians see the Russians as they're orcs. Like when we think bad, we think orc. And it can become an issue when, orcs are coded in such a way that invokes specifically non-European cultures. Also, to the point about saying, oh, well, if you're black and you see yourself in the orcs, that's a problem. Dr.
Didn't say that.
Dr.
say that.
Ebony,
I
Dr.
literally said
Ebony.
I have no problem with it.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, Doctor. Well, you said
You're
maybe
responding
don't
to
see
no.
yourself. Maybe don't see
Yes,
yourself in the
I said-
monsters because you're not a monster.
Yes.
Dr. Ebony Elizabeth Thomas's book. She's a fantasy scholar, a black fantasy scholar. It's the dark fantastic race and imagination from Harry Potter to the Hunger Games. That when you have
Chat, full disclosure, Charlie called this guy a retard in DMs to me not 10 minutes ago.
you can only help but see yourself in that evil. And this is something that I think I can say as someone who's queer is, I don't know if you've ever heard of like the queer coded villains.
Certainly, yeah.
That it's like things that maybe are not labeled like us, but behave and sound and act a lot like us, and we can go, oh, that one is me. That's the one that they want to be me.
Sure.
And so again, like, regardless of intention, I don't think Tolkien sat down and was like, dude, I hope that all black and brown people see themselves in these evil fucking orcs. It's unfortunate. That's what ends up happening.
I mean, sometimes it ends up happening, but there are countless, thousands, tens of, hundreds of thousands of black fans of Lord of the Rings that don't do it. So obviously it's not this inevitable trap you have to fall into. I respect that scholar feels as though she is compelled to see herself that way in that fantasy. I disagree, and I think all relevant facts would disagree with the idea that it is inevitable that you're going to see yourself as those people, or there would be no black fans of Lord of the Rings.
Do you think it'd be better?
How
if they
often are
didn't
you
do
in
that?
like big fantasy spaces?
Pretty frequently.
So I go to LARP that has like 1,000 people. I go to a LARP live action.
I go to one of the
roleplay
biggest friend fairs on the planet.
Yeah, in Los Angeles,
What are we
which is
doing
a
the dick
very,
measuring for?
very multicultural area. No, listen.
Yeah.
Cultural. Oh my god,
There's
that's neat.
There's like 3 black people at my like 1,000-person LARP. There is like 3 black people, and this is because fantasy
Make
is
them wear armbands. So
unfriendly.
I mean,
we do not
okay.
do that, Wick.
Again, you can
And
just
every
declare
black
it's
friend I
because
have
it's
has,
unfriendly.
has
but
expressed this issue with fantasy to me. I could
Okay.
pull my best
I'm sorry,
friend and
Q
mod on here,
calling them
Dramos, and he will rant at
semi-slurs
you about
is
fantasy.
hilarious.
He's black, and he'll
I'm
say,
gonna
"I
start
don't
using
feel
that.
represented in
Wasn't a
fantasy."
slur,
Sure.
that
You know
was
what
a
most of my black
semi-slur.
friends
You guys are
say
weird.
about fantasy? Yes, that's what most black people that I know say about fantasy. Like, that's weird, that's gay. Like, that's what they say about fantasy. It's not because they're like, well, the orcs were the only dark-skinned people in Lord of the Rings, so I don't fuck with fantasy. You're like, you're being gay, you're dressing up and swinging swords around. That's what they say.
So wait,
That's
Phil,
the reason why they don't like it.
before-
You can't just
before we go further-
declare that it's because of orcs and Lord of the Rings and similar issues like that. Because they watch anime, again, where there's very little black depiction, and the little black depiction there is very stereotypical. And there are massive groups of black anime fans. There's almost like a
It's
cult
a context
black.
removed from our current culture. It's Japanese culture. I get your point.
Can I?
I mean, it's
but
not.
it's not the
Anime
culture
was
that they're
just
living in.
Anime
I
was
do wanna
made as
read
a
some
parody
super
of
chats so I
American
can make
culture.
some
That's why they
goddamn
have
money
the big
here.
eyes and the cartoonish white features. But sure.
I'm going to get to the super chats and we're going to get back to the discussion, but I do make it a little money. And thank you for the donations. If you're enjoying this content for whatever reason, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Follow me if you're watching on Twitch or Kick or whatever. But let me read these. I'll get through them quick and then we'll get to it. Cool. $5 from Deej Nuts to say new super chatters. Nice. Thank you. $2 from Songy and Stew to say, Nos, Doug, we're quadrupling down. We hope you're in. Another $2 says Songy has not read the books, but these are spoilers. Well, if you haven't read Lord of the Rings, it's too late. $5 from TL1524 says this is the problem with leftists who consume media that isn't their generation. You go racism hunting when racism can't be found, so you manifest it. Thank you for the $5. $5 more dollars from Deej Nuts to say, what real-world race do we associate the bugs with in Starship Troopers?
Vietnamese.
$2 from Deej Nuts. What real race?
Multicultural. James is like, I got one for that.
oh, there's a point. Keep going, Wick.
Well,
Hold on to it.
make a note of the ones you want to respond to, and then you can respond to it when I'm done. $2 from Deej Nuts to say what real race is Tyranids or demons in Freerin. Freerin? Yeah. $5 from
sucks.
What?
I
Fearin's
fucking
good.
hate Frieren. Holy
What's your problem with
bullshit
Frieren?
anime. Boring.
It's a little boring. I'll give you that. It's beautiful though.
$5 from Gelatinous Rube to say Lord of the Rings is slop. It was forced to push out the American tradition of fantasy and their inspirations. $5 more from Gelatinous Rube to say Lord of the Rings is derivative of Lord Dunsany. Read The King of Elfland's Daughter to better understand Tolkien. And then $5 finally from Deej Nuts to say, memes aside, if you hear about hordes of dark-skinned orcs and that are ontologically evil and you think black people, then you're probably racist. Okay, with that,
God, wait, hold on.
I made a little money.
I need to respond to your dipshit fucking super chatters because this really pisses me off.
Go
It's like, white people for decades and decades and decades use like a stereotype like, hey, black people are monkeys. And then someone depicts a black person or a monkey and like some black person's like, hey, I think that might evoke me. And they're like, oh, you think you're like a gorilla? That makes you racist. It's like, no, it's just in the context of this being used this way for decades against this race, you stupid motherfucker. Yeah. Anyway, the problem
I agree
would
with
say
Sora. You have no friends on this page. panel, whoever that super chatter was.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, I appreciate that, Jeb. The problem here, though, and again, I might actually, to a degree, agree with you, Jeb, that, like, yeah, the larger problem is not how many black people are turned away from fantasy. There's, like, a litany of variables as to why black people don't go LARPing, and it's not just because they watch Lord of the Rings, like, there's no black people here. It's, LARPing is a privileged hobby. You need more money to do it. There's, like, the communities that form around it are from, typically other wealthier white people. But the problem is not in so much that, I mean, it is a problem, but, like, much more of the problem is when people who do consume this media, so i.e. not the black people who are turned off because of the lack of representation, but the white people who watch it and think, oh, all these black people or this group of people or whatever people is depicted as evil, and that influences the way they think about real life races, especially when the races in their fantasy are reflective of those real life races. It influences their stereotypes, and that's why you see so much racism in the fantasy community. That's like why I brought up the Lord of the Rings Rings of Power trailer and how, like,
I would say my
apeshit people
fantasy
went.
communities are some of my least racist communities I've ever been in.
That's
They're
telling on
the
yourself,
most
buddy. Just because you go in other
race
racist
inclusive.
communities does not absolve the fantasy community.
I live in Southern California. I go to the
Yeah?
same events that she's referring to.
Uh-huh.
I'm in
Wait, are
almost
you a-
no racist spaces. Am I what?
Are you a racist? What?
I can't hear you, sir.
Are you a twin masker?
No.
Oh, never mind.
But
I don't know what that means. But
Mark.
whatchamacallit? No, I'm not in many racist spaces. They're
What's
honestly
one more racist
only
space than fantasy?
only because they're hard to find. I mean, Star Wars fandom
Twitter.
is way more racist than fucking fantasy
Oh,
fandom,
well,
dude.
okay.
Hold on.
And I also don't
Star
fraternize
Wars
with
is
them
kind
because
of
Star
fantasy
Wars.
too, though, right?
Star Wars also sucks. That can be the next panel.
True.
Star Wars is fucking
Star Wars
mid as
does
fuck.
suck. That is true. But I do want to
Yeah.
I do want to touch on this because
Wait, let
this
James
is
ask his
something-
question.
Yeah.
we will in a second. But I want to get this out before I forget, please.
Okay.
Are fantasy fans more racist than normal people?
Probably.
Far less.
I think that okay. First of all, we are all white.
That doesn't mean we're
Janice?
racist.
I'm not. I'm only white.
What?
I'm not white in spirit.
I would want like a
I'm
I
on
would
the
want like a survey done. I would want like a survey done.
Sure.
You know,
Okay,
like what is
that's
like
academic.
for like black nerds? Has it been like fantasy, sci-fi? Like what's the vibe? Community to community, you know?
Yeah. Sure. I can see an underlying argument there that potentially maybe the reason why they have big anime circles is maybe they're just looking for the least. They're not given a lot of great options in terms of like non-contemporary fiction to enjoy, and so maybe they pick anime because it's like the least racist to them. I can understand that point of view, and it might even be true. My thing is, I've not heard it once in my life a black person tell me that the reason they're not as into fantasy is because there's less representation of black people. It's usually because of some other subjective thing that they like more about anime, or because they watched Cartoon Network and Toonami came on right after the other shit that they watched.
But Jeb,
Like,
this is selection bias. How many people are you friends with that don't like fantasy and also don't like fantasy because they are black and don't feel represented? Like, these people aren't going to be crossing
zero.
paths with. Exactly,
Yeah.
right. Like, you haven't met these
They're
people.
going to be
Probably-
crossing back. My life isn't defined by my fantasy fandom or anything like that.
That's probably a
I
big
was not a
overlap,
huge
though.
anime.
You go
I
to
was-
LARP
I don't-
events, like, this is at least a
Can
significant part of
can
your
I
life.
explain it? Can I explain
I
it?
go to one a
Yeah,
year.
please elaborate on what you just said.
Again, I think that the reason that fantasy draws in so many white people, because of the genre conventions established by
And to be
J.R.R.
clear,
Tolkien.
you are implying by this that they are racist, right?
Who is?
That fantasy fandoms, groups, etc., have a larger propensity of racists than.
I would say that they have some very established, as Helen Young would put it, habits of whiteness.
Okay,
Which
explain, because I don't know what that means.
I'm explaining. So again, because of the genre conventions
Chat.
established by J.R.R.
Gabriel,
Tolkien,
you called it.
fantasy settings almost nearly universally, unfortunately, take place in a neo-medieval European setting. Now, again, in the popular culture's imagination, we envision medieval Europe as very monochrome. There's only white people. There's no one ever moved anywhere. There were no Jews. The Moors never took over Spain. None of that happened. Roman Empire, nothing. None of that happened. It was just the whites. And it was also, you could see that in George R. R. Martin's. There was, they think it was constant, insane anime levels of warfare and mass rape at all times. inaccurate. The medieval era was actually very boring, unfortunately. It was also kind of multicultural, you know? People did move. It wasn't unheard of for people to see black and brown people. But again, it has become sort of, and I think especially for Americans, where because we do feel disconnected from our European ancestry, we kind of look to medieval European fantasy as, well, this is our identity as a people. This is our ancestry. It's not. We're Americans, and again, the conflation of actual medieval history with neo medieval fantasy, and also just like medieval media that sensationalizes shit. I don't remember where I was going with this, but anyway, the point is that it appeals to white. It appeals to white people because it's usually depicting only white people or a bunch of white people, and it centers European cultures, our culture's ancestry, and that's kind of that. I think sci-fi is very different because, again, in sci-fi it looks more towards the future, and there's a lot more possibilities for different people to exist. Does that make any sense? Did we follow that, or did I?
No, you did a good job.
Did I lose anyone?
Yeah, I'm just
landed the plane.
The reason, I guess, that I wanted you to elaborate, and the thing that I am confused about, perhaps, is why that's bad.
Well, why it's bad that there's a genre that, because I think it, and again, I think we are seeing this.
Why is it bad
the
genre that's primarily Euro coded?
It's bad when we are kind of like worshiping at the altar of this mythic past in which medieval Europe was great because it was monochrome. Men were men, women were women, and women knew their place, and there was no gays or trans people at all. And that's kind of what we do with a lot of medieval fantasy and pop culture medieval bullshit, is we imagine it as this pure time of pure whiteness. And this was something that began in the 19th century. The Victorian imagination latched on to medieval Europe and simplified it. So again, I think it's bad because I think even when it's innocent, I think it does establish habits of whiteness in the sense that people who are black and brown can feel unwelcome in certain spaces, and also because fan cultures tend to worship authors and pieces of the media that they love and don't like criticism. It becomes very unfriendly.
DW, that got me. I don't know why.
I'm not.
Yeah, let me ask this, and Charlie, as a follow up. Would it be so your argument, as I understand it, you can confirm, is that one of the problems with this is that it kind of, not by design perhaps, but out of just happenstance or as a result of it does make people who are not part of this Euro-coded kind of worldview feel excluded when they go there. Is that kind of your argument? Did I kind of get it right, or?
Yes, and I think that when that is kind of the only, for a very long time, that was kind of the only accepted depiction of fantasy. People just wanted to see the European castles,
And and given that that's the case, then if that's your argument, would it also be bad if there was a genre that depicted a lot of African culture, a lot of African stereotypes, a lot of African design, a lot of African ways of doing things? Would it be bad that someone who was more European, who was kind of white-coded or whatever, might feel a little excluded from that? Would that be bad too?
I haven't heard of any media like that.
Wakanda
even
forever.
If it happened,
fantastic.
Wakanda
If it
forever.
happened, I mean, I think given this context, in the sense that there are so few fantasy novels that have this setting, I don't think that would be bad. I think that there would have to be a long tradition of exclusion established, like there is with European medieval fantasy, for that to be a problem. I think if for years and years the only thing in fantasy was this takes place in like fantasy, I don't know, fucking Nigeria, and no one else is allowed and all the white people are evil, then I think we could be like, well, hey, come on now. So the history is different. The context is different.
Wait, also, wait, I have one thing to say, and then I want James to talk, because we keep saying we will, and we don't let him. But I do have to say, I'm going to go way harder than Charlie. I think that fantasy groups are more racist, not because they're mostly white, but because it is a space where you have a lot of people who are doing a hobby that is typically associated with more insecurity and things that are ostracized from the norm. These types of people are also much more likely to play into race science because they can play off of the accomplishments of white people and not, worry about the fact that they themselves have nothing to fucking show for that. They're just like, oh boy.
Losers.
No, I'm saying that people who are insecure are more drawn to ideas like white supremacy because it allows them to feel good about themselves for having done nothing. And when they don't do anything, this ideology gives them a, hey, actually, you're better. Actually, you are worth something by virtue of your birth. And I think there's a lot more of that in fantasy. But I'm not saying all fantasy people are racist. I'm saying it fosters a community of that.
One, the
it's
son of the secret son of kings that... they're pig farmers or whatever, but suddenly they find out that their true lineage, their noble blood that pumps through their veins, has made them the chosen one. And by virtue of that noble blood, they are immune to the evil one's influence. I get what you're saying. I understand.
And that's fine.
That's actually not what I was saying, but that is part of it. But can James please talk? He's so nice, and he's not allowed to.
I will let
you keep saying that you don't.
I mean, you're the one who keeps it from talking, Wick, because you keep asking questions to individual people.
Curious, and it's part of the discussion. Jesus.
And you didn't invite a black person on, by the way, Wick. So who's really racist?
I am black and spirit.
I think Wick, could you find a person of color that liked fantasy to come onto this panel? Because you do.
Majin, are you still watching? He's been DMing me.
onto the panel. And I was gonna make a point about fantasy and whiteness.
Prime
Wick,
Kai
if
loves
this is all
fantasy,
you could
dude.
get, if this is all you could get, Wick.
It's look.
I think that makes the point for us.
Again, Majin, if you're still watching, jump backstage and I'll pull you in, buddy.
Or Prime Kai. Prime Kai is super into fantasy.
I don't think Prime Kai is watching my show right now, but I know Majin is because he's DMing me. Right? We are I don't watch his show all the time, right? He doesn't.
Wow, dude.
Anyway, but James, go ahead and
Thank you, Soy Pill. Thank you, Wick. Appreciate it. So I think one of the things that I was going to talk about previously was kind of the spectrum. And Soy Pill. I kept mentioning you because I think you were invoking the Will Smith movie. Is that? If you're thinking about the same thing I'm thinking about.
It's written by Max Landis, yeah. And all the orcs are like, it's not just like, oh, they're bad. I mean, obviously there's one of the main characters is a good orc, but they are depicted as like these poorer, like, ghetto, like, oh, and they listen to rap music and they shoot guns a lot. It's like very clearly like the laziest allegory for black people ever. And yeah.
I thought the point of that was to be a critique, though. I read reviews of the movie, and they were talking about how I think that was meant to be a critique of how black people are depicted, like they're another. But maybe not. I didn't watch it, so
that's crazy. I wonder why people would make a connection between racism and monstrosity. My God,
bro, you're arguing with a ghost. I never made the claim that there's no validity to the criticism.
Let him speak.
I take a dialing tone from Brights to the robots, the Terminators, the what is it? The Zerglings, or what were we talking? The Tyranids. That's right.
There's bugs from
Right. There's a YouTuber called Legal Kimchi. I watched his video. He made a really good argument for this, and it was this idea of saying, is it a bad thing to have a completely bad group of whatever? And he mentioned them, basically, Zerglings and then the Terminators, So one of the reasons why that is on one scale, or it's on one end, and then you have the other, I think is because there's not any IRL obvious cultural coding to a Terminator. Not really.
Not Austrian?
Or like in a robot. But when you start turning that dial up and adding more cultural context, then that question becomes a stronger question that you have to attend to. I think that's been at least something to contend with. There was something else. If I remember, I'll raise my hand.
Yeah, no, I get it, man. Like, this is the thing. And in terms of like, this proves my argument by itself. The fact that most of the counter arguments to me have been against caricaturized versions of arguments I didn't make kind of goes to show that my take is not that unreasonable here, but I can say, to reiterate, I do not have qualms with the validity of a black person watching Lord of the Rings and not feeling spoken to by that art. I have qualms with the fact that that being the case for some black people means you should never have anything like the orcs in fiction again, and that things are better when you move farther away from it necessarily. I think the overall mission of Tolkien was to create British folklore. He saw that the Brits did not have their folklore the way that like Northern European people did and other cultures did, and he created, this is from his own writing in forewords.
Okay, I'm gonna fucking strangle myself. This is actually a huge point of contention within Tolkien scholarship. That was something very, 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 very early on that he wrote to a publisher as a kind of pitch, which he went back on later in life. Writing The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and all that shit was an exercise. He made a bunch of languages because he was a philologist, he was a fucking linguistics nerd, and he wanted to make a story. He wanted to make a story to put those languages in. That's the point.
Where does that contradict that he also had the mission of creating British folklore?
Because he
like,
did
where
it.
does
that is literally a huge point of contention.
He said it.
I can send you a fucking article on it.
No, I get it.
From the editor of Malorn, the
well, hold on.
of the Tolkien Society.
I have a master's scholar in front of me. What did he say that took back when he did affirmatively make that claim? What did he say that negated that claim?
Let me find the fucking article for you.
You're the scholar. Tell me what he said where he was like, actually,
You're
I
a
lied
scholar.
then.
You must have memorized every single word in
I'm
the
sorry,
scholar.
I didn't remember.
It's one of the core
ring.
Memorize my fucking
It's
my,
a core.
my
You said it's a
research.
core contention, one of the first core contentions of Tolkien scholarship. You just said, and you don't even know what the quote was.
We're in
where
like
he
a
went back.
hyper-specific niche of a specific
This is like a
conversation, and she doesn't know it off the top of her fucking head, dude.
This-
Come on.
I don't
It's
know
not
which
been
letter
framed
it
as.
was,
Hold
which
on.
number it was. My fucking
Hold
bad.
on. Stop. You were able to say Tolkien did say he wanted to make British folklore in a letter to a publisher. I'm not looking for like a direct verbatim quote. Just tell me what he said generally. Did he say, "Oh, I take that back"? Or did he say what you just said, which is he stated another motivation that he also had, and so you took that as, and some scholars are taking that as that was actually the motivation, and the other one wasn't. Can you at least give me that level of detail? Because it feels pretty unacceptable to make the claim as rigidly as you did.
I have the article for you.
Okay. For the sake of the conversation, so we can continue to have it.
One of the editors.
Just tell me generally what he said so we can continue to have the conversation, and I will read and get back to you on the source later. I'm not going to sit here and interrupt the conversation to read an entire article when I have a master's scholar here who was willing to so rigidly and so emotionally make the claim. Like you were passionate about this claim, but you don't have even like a general vague idea of what he said that negated it. What did he say that negated it? Like generally.
It was later on in his fucking career. I don't
what?
fucking
Not
remember.
when? Well, then why were you so intent and intense in making that claim?
Because
when you
that's
didn't
the
have the
state of
evidence.
Things. I don't fucking know. You.
Yeah, to know
Well,
that there is
you
a
should
conflict.
know.
No, to know
Like,
that. Wait, whoa.
Am I crazy?
A little bit, because you're saying just
about?
because someone knows that there is a discussion and like a contention going off and doesn't
She
necessarily.
didn't frame it as a discussion. She said I had a misconception, and I definitely
because you
was
were
so
speaking
wrong.
so assuredly about it, knowing nothing, and she's saying,
Because
well,
we agree that he said it in a letter to a publisher. I knew he
and
had
she's
said it
saying,
in a letter to a publisher.
and she's like, in these scholarly circles, that's not necessarily the case. And
Okay,
she's apparently,
to quote,
here we go.
what did he say?
Shut up. Letters 144 to 145. Do not laugh, but once upon a time, my crest has long since fallen. I had a mind to make a body of more or less connected legend, ranging from the large and cosmogonic to the level of romantic fairy story. The larger founded on the lesser in contact with the earth, the lesser drawing splendor from the vast backcloths, which I could dedicate simply to England, to my country. Do not laugh, but once upon a time, my crest has long since fallen.
Okay.
He says
So he
in
had that
letter-
motivation, and it changed over time as he was making the work.
Oh my god, like I just said.
No, you
Like
said
I
he
literally
didn't
just
have
said
it.
to you.
You said he like didn't have that motivation. His
I
motivation
feel
was
like I'm
actually
being gaslit.
this.
Hey guys, what did I say?
I think
You
you
said in a
I'm
letter to a
moderator.
publisher.
I'm gonna stay out of it.
Okay.
I'm sure that James.
Here's what he
James,
said.
you're the
How
one-
about, buddy? You should have been listening to both.
I've been honest about everything. I've been honest about every claim that's been
that
made.
he said it at one
Yeah,
point
she
and
was-
then changed it later on. I did say that explicitly.
You said that his motivation was never that, though.
No, she said that it was contested
said
in
it
the
was-
circles, and you were speaking definitively
That his
about it
motivation
using
was
it.
ever to create British folklore.
that it was contested
said
that
he
was
said-
his explicit motivation, and you were saying no, it's definitely this at the beginning. She could have said it's contested. You're
I
speaking
said it's
very
definitely a
assuredly.
motivation to making the work, and it still was.
You weren't
He is
even aware
confirming
that
that
there was-
was
I'm
the
not giving
motivation.
I'm not giving a ruling because I don't remember the exact verbiage used.
Yeah. So
Do not
again,
laugh, but once upon a time,
so
my crest
can-
has long since fallen.
But-
So
but
that
it
was
is
the
clear-
thing he had at one time, and then he changed his mind.
It is
Sure.
clear from that letter that he may have had aspirations to do
Thank
so
you,
at one
Gabriel,
time,
for the
but
two R.
he considered it laughable.
Looks like she found
that
it.
he had those
I'll
aspirations.
maybe
Well,
I'll
he
bring up
thought
later.
that maybe-
Laughing at
2:30 as
himself,
well.
He thought it was ridiculous.
okay,
So
Not necessarily thought it was ridiculous.
The inference there, just real quick, the inference there is that he may have had these lofty goals, but through the
Yeah.
course of his work, he never met those. He never.
okay, that does
accomplished that.
no.
He
See,
just-
this is the issue: is now we're saying things he didn't say. Not that he never met those. Not that he never did it, and that he never made a
Would you
single
like to
work
read,
according
do you want me
to
to
it.
read? Do you want me to read out the fucking article for you? It's
The
a long
quote-
ass article. I don't think you're
No.
going to read it yourself, but I
So
would
the-
love for you to
I
actually
will read it
through
later,
and
but
do
we're
the
in a
fucking
discussion.
research.
So, do you know what point I was about to make? Since you are so
I don't
intent in
know,
arguing
Moron,
with
you're
it
just
before,
saying
surprised
that
me
you
several
you're
times in this
also-
discussion, actually.
Actually, yeah, you're saying.
So, okay, I'm aware that you guys haven't been able to understand the points I've been making up till now because you've constantly responded to ones that aren't the ones I've very clearly made. One, I have no qualms with people who have an issue with those parts of his fiction. Two, it just doesn't make that bad and you should never do it. One of the motivations of his work, this is the point I was making. One of the motivations of his work, admittedly again, having been at the core of it, at the beginning of it, to create some folklore connected to the British homeland, right? It's gonna be a little British. That was the point. Just like Asian folklore kind of puts Asians at the forefront, Norse folklore puts Northmen at the forefront. Someone who is initially inspired to make British folklore is probably going to put the British at the forefront. And just as I don't fault Norse folklore, just as I don't fault Asian folklore, just as I will also not fault British folklore. I won't fault any folklore for putting to the forefront their culture because that's the folklore. And so just because he said, you know what, it was funny of me to think that I could make something that grand for British people, like I could match Norse folklore or Asian folklore with my British folklore, doesn't mean that he hated the idea and thought the whole concept was ridiculous. It could just mean that was his original inspiration. Then he
It's still-
realized
it's-
maybe
it's
that's
an
an
wasn't the-
unreasonable scale. Because I think
But
if
it
you
was an
told
inaccurate
Tolkien,
statement. It's an inaccurate statement.
what was an inaccurate statement?
It's an inaccurate
To
statement
say that his
the
original
Lord of the Rings
inspiration.
is a mythology for England. It's not.
Well, so good that I didn't say that then. I just said one of his
You did-
original
you did actually
inspirations
say-
was
you did actually
creating
say
British.
That. You said it was supposed to be a mythology for England, and it's not. And
I
you
said
guys
one
always
of
do
his
this.
original
Fans
inspirations
love
was.
to do this because you guys don't fucking read.
I said
You don't
one
read.
of
You
his
guys watch
original
YouTube videos
inspirations.
made by morons.
Okay, Charlie.
Can I ask you a question?
I said
Jed?
one
I don't
of his
wanna strum at you.
original. No, not while I'm saying something.
You're always saying something.
I said one of his original inspirations was to create British folklore, which clues into what he was likely going to put in the forefront of it. Just because he then thought it's ridiculous of me to assume that scale of my work and to assume I could make something that grand and that fantastical for British people by myself, right?
So
Doesn't mean that he said the idea of making British
Thank you,
folklore is
mildly
stupid.
muscular mom.
That
for
is
becoming
not
a basic
what is
being.
being
I really
said there.
appreciate it.
Okay,
I'm doing.
but
It's
hold on,
just
having a lot of
that
fun
he's
today.
making British
Yeah,
forward
I know.
you're
work.
both saying different things, and I'm not sure who.
Hold on,
I'm
someone
not-
pulled a clip.
Someone pulled a clip. You can share your screen, and we can watch it together. If
Okay.
if you want.
Yeah, let's do it right now.
Okay. Majin's driving, so he can't join the panel. Why are you watching my show on
He
your
can join a
phone?
panel driving
Let's see it.
if he can watch it.
Ready?
No,
driving.
you
Ready?
can't on
Wait,
Twitch. You
everyone,
can't on-
everyone.
Okay.
The overall mission of Tolkien was to create British folklore. He saw that the Brits did not have their. Where are we watching? Overall mission of Tolkien. The overall mission of Okay. Tolkien was the overall mission of Tolkien. The overall mission
Mm-hmm.
of Tolkien was to create.
Okay. Well, I think it's pretty clear that you did say that, Jeff.
I just
Okay,
did say
sure.
that.
So again, what about
What
the
do you mean, so
argument?
again? Like,
So again,
So,
'Cause
wait, what?
I'm going to clarify.
well, can I ask you a question to make sure
Let's
I'm not
make
strong?
no. Let's
You don't need
finish
to
the
clarify. We already
clarification
showed
here.
your clarification in the
I
past,
do.
right?
No, but you don't even know what you're arguing with. So again, whether it was the
It sounds
overall,
like you don't know what your argument is because you just said you
Let
didn't
him
say
clarify.
that.
Let him clarify. Let him clarify.
Okay, let him clarify.
whether it is the overall, as I said, or the original. One word difference, whether it's the overall or the original, does it change the fact that it's acceptable for someone with that original inspiration instead of overall to make a British forward?
Original inspiration.
It was an original inspiration. He himself said my original crest or whatever was to do it. He acknowledged at the beginning of the work, I had the goal to do this. It is then my goal has
So he
since
said, "Do not
changed."
laugh, but once upon a time."
Yes.
That doesn't mean that's my original goal. That means at one point he thought that
Sure.
might be. Because
Okay.
a lot of the stories and a lot of the languages are actually, they're more like Finnish than anything.
Sure. Cool. Anyway, someone who had an original, a past, an inceptive inspiration to create British folklore. Is it unacceptable for that person? Because again, you guys refuse to contend with core points. You only want to quibble on weird little things, and half of them aren't things I said, like it's ridiculous that
Well, you can
a
write
black
a story
person
set
could
in
fucking...
Britain, or like you
Yes,
can write a fantasy
but is it
story
bad?
with inspirations in British culture.
Bad? Is it bad
Sure.
writing?
Well,
That's the arguments that have been made this whole
Jeb,
time.
this
It's
is perfect.
bad
This is
to do
perfect.
so.
This is
It's
what my
bad
question was.
writing.
Jeb, this is what my question was. Okay, look, I think you and I agree. Tell me if I'm strawmanning you here. I think you and I would agree if there is a character in a fantasy setting or in any setting, and he happens to be Jewish, and he complains a lot, and he's greedy, and he has like an accent, and he's going, whoa, that's not something that should never happen. That could be bad. But there's probably ways to do this in which you are not portraying every Jew as bad. That's probably fine, right? Like, I think that you probably think that, right? Okay, if I wrote a fantasy book, and
you have to, Harry Potter fan.
I wrote a fantasy book, and I had a race of people called the Habrus, and the Habrus are, every single Habru is very greedy and very whiny and very, very Jewish. Is that okay? Yeah. Would you be okay with this story?
It just depends on the rest of the content.
It's
of the
really
story.
well written,
but
every Habru is bad. Every Habru is a bad, stereotypical Jew.
I could potentially be okay with that story, depending on what the rest of the story
that's
is.
What
right?
I think your position is, which is fucking stupid. I'm sorry, that's terrible writing. So that's it. All right.
I mean, it's not terrible writing. So let's say you had a Habru story, and you had the Notesees, who were the good fellowship of Notesees.
Please don't call it Habru. I just no, go ahead.
Well, no, I'm going with his funny thing, because no, I agree that what you're picturing in your head has to come from that art, right? Is there's the Notesees and the Habrus, and the brave Notesees are going to go, and they're going to take it to the Habrus, and they're going to take all their gold back and defeat those evil Habrus. That could be bad, because
no, I'm saying there's no way it could be good if you're calling them Habrus and they're exactly like Jews. There's zero.
Sure, if he called them the Mongolians and was like, if he was really like, these are only Mongols and Mongols are bad, like, sure, if it was way more severe than the way he did it,
okay,
sure.
So
what he said
like,
was
imagine Hassan wrote Lord of the Rings.
There's a line.
Hassan wrote Lord of the Rings.
Sure,
okay.
No, yes, there's absolutely
I
have
a lot of Hassan heads in my chat.
Yes. So you agree, but Jeb,
that adds up.
You agree at least that the point of, like, I'm not saying you agree with our position, but you agree at least to the point that there is a line where it's like, okay, this is so overtly, no matter how good the rest of the writing is, this is so overtly on the nose that this is bad writing. This is lazy writing. Okay, that's what we're saying. At least that's what I'm saying. Charlie might be saying that.
You're saying the line is somewhere different. Yeah.
Yeah. My line is, if every single person in your thing is, hey, they're the bad brown people, that's bad writing. I think Tolkien is mostly good. I think that part of it is bad. We can critique it. Maybe it was okay at the time, and if we do it again, it's probably pretty fucking stupid.
But here's my issue is I've been phrasing my argument that way the whole time, that there could be a line, but that doing it once and having any way of doing it doesn't just make it bad, and you can't use it ever.
I don't want to derail, but I would
You
go
guys
with
have been the ones arguing that the point, well, not you, Charlie was this one. The point is to always iterate and make better, and the way you iterate and make better, or at least a chief way to iterate and make better, is to eliminate any semblance of this kind of stuff. Any ontologically evil race in fantasy.
That's not what...
Out. That is what has been made.
Charlie, are you opposed to the concept of an ontologically evil race?
Born evil.
I find it very boring.
Sure, but like,
I find it incredibly fucking boring. Unless it's like
can't think or something, you know.
You're a Tolkien scholar. You can't get qualms of boring.
Let her
it's
answer the question, please.
Best, most boring fantasy of all time.
You think Lord of the Rings is boring?
No, it's like the meme that it's boring, but it is great.
Okay.
Like we can't be the ones to take qualms of boring over all else. Is the joke I'm making.
Oh, I've never found it boring. Anyway,
Neither have I, but
I mean, I do take a bit of an issue with it because again, I think it's boring. I think that they would have to be it would be very specific cases, like if it were like evil spirits or something.
Like
Or
demons.
yeah, kind of, but even then I
Demons from
think
hell. You're okay with them all being bad, right?
well,
yeah.
Kinda.
it matters case by
Probably.
case, right? Because there's a little bit of that in the orcs, but
but what if every demon looked like a black guy?
Yeah, what if
Would you
the
be okay
well,
with that, Jeb?
I don't think your issue is that all of them look like black people. I think your issue is that other people on the good side don't. I think we can clarify that that's your issue. You could have a group of black leathery looking orcs like we had in Lord of the Rings, but if there was a couple black guys in the Fellowship, it wouldn't feel as bad to you, correct?
Probably, yeah, I would say so. If
Okay,
you're not
so the
depicting
issue-
them
it would
exclusively.
feel
Yeah.
less bad.
But
However,
even
that's
then-
not what
Thing.
happened.
Yeah, first of all, yeah, that's not the
Sure.
reality. And second of all, if then still,
I'm not
that
saying
was-
it was the
okay,
reality.
okay,
I'm
I
saying
know,
that
I
your
understand.
issue
Wait,
is
wait,
not
wait.
with
but
the
if,
races.
No, it is, because if there were black people in the Fellowship, let's say, but also every single orc was completely depicted as a black stereotype, I would still think that's bad, even if there were
Yeah, like,
representation on
and that's the thing. If
Yeah.
there was
get-
more direct, so like the orcs, the reason. So here's the reason. Like aesthetically, they were written. Obviously, we're not talking about the movies. So if you just watch the movies, you're kind of not going to get the Mongol comparison as much. But in the books, yes, they're described a little more Mongolian in feature and things like that, right?
I think
The
slant-eyed is used.
Yes,
Slant-eyed with
Certainly.
black skin,
Flat
big red
nose.
lips,
yes, flat nose, whole thing.
wide flat nose. Yeah.
So, and aesthetically, he kind of goes with neutral features of Mongolians to, other than the aesthetic features, the only features he applies to the orcs that are Mongolian in nature are the bad ones. Like they ride in on backs of beasts and kill and pillage, right? He wasn't doing like what you said, black stereotypes. He wasn't talking about what Mongolians do when they hang out, you know? Like in the Bright thing, the issue was that they were, for you, was that they were showing orcs hanging out on stoops, listening to hip hop music, probably like drinking a 40 and shit like that. Like that's a problem
Graffiti
because
everywhere.
they're
yeah,
they're
Well,
taking
you
the
do actually
all-encompassing
see
culture
orcs
of
just
blackness
hanging out.
and
You
apply.
do see orcs just hanging out. It's when
And they're not doing like
they're in
Mongolian
Shelob's.
things.
It's when
Yeah.
Sam is
Getting-
eavesdropping, listening
Yeah.
to two orcs talking about how Shelob will wrap their friends up and leave them there, and you get
Yeah.
you almost get a glimmer of like something human in the orcs. We're talking
Yep.
about like, wow, yeah, I'd love to have my own land too. I kind of hate working for Sauron. And then they start going, it's so funny when we found our friend wrapped in Shelob's web, haha, and then we left him to die.
Yeah. And so that's
Because
the
he's
thing
weak
is
and
like
he sucks, and we should kill
Yes.
those ones.
No,
like
you're missing my
just
point.
totally.
Yeah, you're
tanked.
missing
So
my
again,
point.
that's orcs hanging out. Haha, our friends are dying. That's funny.
No, yes, exactly. So they're not depicting orcs hanging out like the way that Soypill was saying you would have a problem with if they made them so Jewy and everything about them was so Jewy and it was so obviously a Jew stereotype. Orcs hanging out didn't feel like Mongolians hanging out. It felt like evil orcs hanging out. They had their own identity that was purely the negative aspects of a warrior race of people that liked to kill and pillage. It wasn't like the Bright metaphor. It wasn't like the Habru metaphor, where also we showed them doing just regular culturally Jewish or culturally black things all the time, and then showed that those people are all evil. It was like he described their aesthetics neutrally as
$5.
Mongolian.
Yeah.
But
if you're
then
saying it could be
everything
worse,
else,
I
he
agree.
only applied the negatives.
I agree.
Let me
It
read
could be
this super
worse.
chat. $5 for Mori Momento. Thank you for the
Bastard was flying
$5.
with the Jewy.
I'm supposed to read this dramatically, okay?
Okay.
Oh no! We can't upset Hassan! Thank you. Okay, you're welcome.
She did not say
What a
that.
fucking liar,
Oh,
dude! What a
no,
fucking
not
She was
measly
Hassan.
leading.
little liar!
I said I have Hassan
Yeah.
fans
Expel them.
I know, and
that I don't
was
want to
probably
upset. I don't care
I'm
about.
inferring from the text that the reason that this person made the super chat was because that was said.
Wait,
That's my
Oh, yeah.
inference.
wait.
I think
Charlie
I'm
just
pretty accurate
DM'd
in
me
my
on
inference.
Discord and said Hassan is stupid. I just want everyone to know that.
Whoa.
I did not do that.
She said specific, and she said, "Don't
Maybe
read
I
this
did.
aloud."
Maybe there's
She
a
said,
little.
"Don't
Maybe
read this
I did.
aloud," and also Hassan is stupid. And I said, "Okay." So sorry.
Oh, that's funny. Okay. With look, we've really gone down the rabbit hole. We got stuck on this. There was so much I wanted to talk about, right? Let me just ask this. To kind of like
Oh wait, hold on. I'm so sorry. I was being a really bad scholar. Because
Bad
it was
scholar.
not Mongolian. This is one of the letters With Tolkien describing the orcs as squat, broad, flat-nosed, sallow-skinned, which means yellow, with wide mouths and slant eyes. In fact, degraded and repulsive versions of the least lovely Mongol types.
Mongols.
He does not mean specifically Mongolian. He's talking about the scientific racism category of all Asian people.
Well, not necessarily. That's a little bit of a logical leap.
No,
You could
that's
just
what
as
the-
easy. No, Mongol types is what I'm saying. You're making a logical leap based on Mongol types. You could just as easily argue he is trying to not specifically target Mongols with that language, and he's saying like Mongoloid, the way that we insult people now.
Just the ugly one.
But if you had to bet $100,
Mongoloid means not. It means.
If
Asians,
I'm making
bro.
a war
means
book and I'm saying
it
I'm
means
making the
Asians.
bad people Mongol types, I could very easily just be saying
that
that
was
the.
what they were saying. That's what.
Yes.
Dude, it means.
Let
it
me
does mean-
finish!
it
I
meant
know that's what
Asian.
they were
It meant
saying!
Asian. He literally
Yes.
meant Asian. He meant Asians.
Wait,
Also,
where did he
Jeb,
say it?
Jeb, why do you keep jumping
Or did he
back?
say the
Racism's
Mongol types
okay.
as in
Actually,
I'm
no, he
trying
never
to
meant it that
invoke
way? Like, why do
general
you keep
steppe
jumping
tribes
between these?
because Mongols were not the only steppe tribes at the time. Mongols were not the only ones that were part of Genghis Khan's regime. Mongols were not the only ones raiding on horseback. He is saying that they look like general steppe peoples who attack people at that time. He could easily be talking about the military invocation he is trying to invoke with them, which is the fact that they are a wild, unorganized, guerrilla-style, beast-back riding.
Which
Huh?
ones were the worst? Because he said the least lovely Mongol type. So actually, the worst Asians
Yes.
that you can think of. Who are
Yes.
the worst Asians? Out of curiosity.
Genghis Khan's group of marauders who killed and raped people. That's what he's
who
talking
were all
about.
biologically evil. Every single born evil.
In his book, he
Ontologically
made
evil.
them born evil to simplify the context so we didn't have to read a whole book about the background of it if we didn't want to in order to understand these are the bad guys, they're after bad things. That's okay. That's the whole point I've been making.
Do you think it would be better if
He
he
was
didn't do that?
talking. No!
So you're saying it's better to simplify it for dipshits who can't understand nuance?
I think you don't need to go into full detail about every aspect of a story all the time. I think you can get
add
very
a line
simple with
specifically
stuff.
like, by the way, all these guys are fucking evil. You didn't have to add that
Yeah.
line.
Sure, but that line is necessary for the context. You need to understand that there's no reasoning with this group of people, and that is why you don't see diplomatic actions being taken by the party you're supposed to support.
It's because they are like and they look like and are
It's not because they look like
Asians.
Mongols.
No,
No, it's not because they
No.
look like Asians. It's because they
degraded
are
and
fallen
repulsive versions
demonic
of
men.
the least lovely Mongol types. He
Yes,
said they
aesthetically-
look and act like the worst Asians.
Did
that
he
you can
say that
imagine.
that's the reason they were born evil? Because that's the claim you just made.
If they're the only people that look like that, and all of the
Then
good
that
guys
means that
are white
everything bad
people?
about them is because of that? That's the
could've
thing that you're
sworn
making
I think
logical
that you
leaps.
might
You said the
be-
racism
dude,
was okay earlier.
I cannot wrap my head. I cannot
can
wrap
explain
my
it
head
again.
around
So-
how your brain works. Like, I
What do you
feel like
mean?
most
My brain
people-
works in a normal progressive way, that just because the vast majority of a group of people that do a bad thing look a certain way does not mean that they do the bad thing because they look a
Yeah,
certain
Charlie,
way.
you're
I think-
racist, Charlie.
I think-
You're assuming
no,
all the Mongols were
Oh
bad.
my god. No, what I'm saying
And
is
they just
Tolkien
happen to-
isn't saying he didn't say they're born evil because they have slant eyes. He said they're born evil because they are converted fallen beings that gave their allegiance to a dark power.
Oh, okay. 'Cause it's not
Elves
racist.
did ages.
That's why.
Elves twisted by Melkor. They are descendants
Yes.
of them. So their
Yes.
long back ancestors sin, just like the
Yes.
tribes of Ham. Oh my god.
Disaster Whiskey, thank you for the 5A. Tolkien is very clearly drawing upon, yes, obviously, he's jumping away from the idea that this is the stereotypes of them at the past, and he's saying that never happened. I don't know why.
Their ancestors sinned, and then they were corrupted forever, and it gave them black skin.
Sure.
But also-
that is exactly what's happening here.
Yes,
this
Jeb,
is so
it's
good
not
of you.
exactly what's happening.
Jeb, at the
He's
beginning
telling
of
a
this debate-
fantasy story.
Jeb,
he is
at-
not prescribing the way that you act in person. He
Teachers
is
are
just
made to make
It
them
is a
sound worse and scary and bad. If you were
It is
describing someone
made
as slant
to
eyed,
make it
sallow
clear-
skin, flat nose, like a fucking
Yes.
creature, not like a human being.
to make them.
It is racially caricaturizing them to
Yes.
increase how repulsive and evil
Certainly.
we find them. How do
It
you
is
not get that?
invoking. It is invoking an image of another
Of a racial
marauding
caricature.
guerrilla military force, the worst of this group of people who went around and marauded and killed and raped, just like the orcs did. He invoked the facsimile of a similar group in real life in order to clarify a connection of that's the kind of military you're dealing with. You're dealing with a military that takes stop.
No, because you don't shut the fuck. You can't. You're fucking 9/11ing, and I'm gonna stop you from 9/11ing. Do you think that if he didn't describe them as looking all the same,
I'm
people
pausing
wouldn't
what I'm
get it?
saying and continuing it when you're done. I'm not answering your question.
Continue
until I'm
9/11.
done
Go
with my
ahead.
point. Okay, so. He is not saying they are evil because they look like Mongolians. He's saying these guys are evil, horseback riding pillagers and marauders, and so I made them look more like real life evil, pillaging, horseback riding marauders, which were the Mongols, to clarify that connection. They're not evil in my story because they look like Mongols. They're evil in my story because they're cursed by essentially the devil, and they are a devil race of people, the same way that like demons are. They're humanoid demons, except I didn't make them red. I made them look like a marauding band that you can more personally connect with as people who are not going to negotiate. They're coming in to kill and to rape because that is what the Mongols
so all
did.
the good people are white and all the bad people are brown and black and Asian.
I mean, no, there are fallowhide hobbits who are not white. There are fallowhide hobbits who are not white. There are wood elves who are not white. There are lots of good races who are not white.
Are there any Mongolian-looking people that are good people?
The fallowhide hobbits are kind of dark-skinned, nomadic people, so yeah, they could potentially look like Mongols as well. They're not black. The Rings of Power misunderstood them as black.
Are they described as slant-eyed and sallow-skinned with wide, flat noses? Like, I don't think you understand. Like, I need you to understand.
They're described as more Hispanic-looking. He similarly in detail describes them as probably more Hispanic-looking or Native American-looking.
It's described as brown.
Yeah. Sure.
So I don't know what the fucking point is, but he is.
You're the ones making the point that there were no brown good people, and now you're saying that Sam was brown.
Well, actually, you didn't even bring up the best example of decent brown people in Tolkien, which is I don't remember the name of the group of people. Oh yeah,
I'm just
brown.
I read the books. I just came with the first one. Most recently I reread The Hobbit.
As much stupider and not as good as their white counterparts.
Oh, so you're saying
kind of the thing with the fallowhide hobbits is they're like not as good as the other hobbits, not as like clever, quick-witted as like the paler ones.
It's not about them being pale. It's about the fact that they lived in the woods and they weren't as big fans of living in civilizations where they had to develop those skills. They were not. This is the thing.
Right.
You are the one essentializing.
Somehow the brown people are like less civilized and the white ones are just...
No, he says they have darker skin because they spend more time in the sun, you dumb fuck. That's the reason. It makes sense that they have darker skin because they live nomadic.
They're not as good as the pale ones. They're just not as smart or as clever.
Can I just point out how Jeb has completely moved on from the beginning of the debate where he was like, yes, this was based in Victorian era racism, but that's totally fine because of this. And now he's like, actually, it was justified. Quiet in a Metal Gear Solid has to wear a bikini because she breathes through her skin. It's not because I wanted to see her naked, okay?
I would love to meet the guy you guys are arguing with because I've not heard him speak once here.
Well, actually, you did hear him speak. We replayed you in chat, and you were totally fucking wrong.
I will say things
find
for
the
money.
clip of me saying that something about Metroid and someone having to wear fucking shit because they breathe through their clothes or whatever. I don't know when I said that bullshit. I don't know when
I'm gonna read my super chats because I want to make some money. $5 from Deej Nuts to say that the orcs were intended to represent Asians by the father of fantasy. Why do you keep talking about black people and orcs? Thank you for $5.
Because the movies, most people interacted with the movies.
The more modern stereotype, it's more.
It's because all minorities look the same to me.
Gotcha. No, it's why we're avoiding the easy. It's because the movies depicted them as really dark skinned. That's the reason why most people.
No, it's more about like specifically what stereotypes they go with. Like World of Warcraft orcs, it's like
okay. I thought you were talking about Tolkien.
Negative stereotypes. Well, yeah, I'm talking. This was about how fantasy has shifted and changed, and again, you have made it about Tolkien, which is so irritating because I want to talk about the
He's talking about a
landscape
super
of
chat
fantasy.
that was just. He was talking about a super chat that was referring to Tolkien. Why are you just not listening and responding to shit? He was like, if he wrote about Mongols, why are we talking about black people? That's specifically talking about Tolkien. The reason we're talking about black people in that context is because
Lord of the Rings about how orcs have
movies
evolved.
Depicted them as darker.
And
the only really dark-skinned people were orcs, and they looked black.
The stereotypes associated with orcs far more resemble negative stereotypes about black people.
Okay, $10 from Old School. Say this, Wick. I thought this lady was a Lord of the Rings expert, quote unquote. She just wants to attach the utterly shallow, woke freshman, spelled freshman, in college analysis to Lord of the Rings.
Woke.
Glad I didn't show. Don't want to hear what she says about Dune. Thank you.
I like
I mean,
Dune.
dude,
Yeah, do you think what
She's-
is
I
wonder what
also
that
love Lord of the Rings.
yeah.
This is literally why I do not engage with like fans of Tolkien. I don't engage. I don't watch their content. I do not fucking engage.
Okay, I mean, relax with the
$2
elitism. I was going to say it doesn't affect her
No, this is the
scholarship that
one
she's
thing-
also
this
trying to
thing.
apply different points of view to it. She's still a scholar, whether she has a different view on it that isn't necessarily the most scholarly.
Then $2 from
Oh, I appreciate that.
TL1524 to
Thank you.
say, "Goddamn Mongolians always going after my city wall." Well, thank you for the $2, and then $5 from Gelatinous Rube to say, "Would destroy these people on American fantasy." Great panel. Charlie, leaping from Tolkien to Mormonism, is lefty Alex Jones tier. Have her back on. Thank you for the $5. Okay, but you
Magine
don't
is in
engage.
the
I'm just
backstage.
really curious before we move on, and we're gonna wrap up here soon.
Magine's in backstage right now.
Oh, good to know. I'll pull him on in for the last little bit, but first I want to, before we do that, I do want to ask Charlie. You say you don't engage. Can you elaborate? Like why you don't engage with the quote unquote fans? What that does sound elitist, right?
It is, and that is the one thing. That is the one thing that I will be elitist on. Unfortunately, is Tolkien stuff. I have a really hard time watching fan content, like fan made content, because I
Why?
get frustrated because a lot of it is inaccurate, and I don't like their interpretations. This is the one thing where it's the one thing that I'm elitist on. Okay, in my whole life.
What
All
would
right.
what would you say is the most common inaccuracy you see in fan content, quote unquote, about Lord of the Rings that makes you like, "Urgh"?
I mean, mythology for England is one. But specifically, I would say most that I've engaged with actually is this is why there can be no black or brown people in Lord of the Rings, and that bothers me. Or why, this conversation essentially is something that bothers me, but also just,
Who said
my
black
God,
and brown people can't be in Lord of the
allegory.
Rings?
lots of people, but no
The
one
fan
here.
base. Yeah.
No,
The
I'm
fan
saying
base,
in
yeah.
here, she said this is essentially that
No, no one-
conversation, and I was like, what?
It's
No
derivative
one here
of it,
said
but
that.
no one said that.
Well,
you're
we're
right.
talking about racism in Lord of the Rings, so that's the conversation.
And-
And I would say I don't. When I talk about Frodo and Sam, I don't like how other people talk about it. I don't like how people talk about Tolkien and allegory. I things like that. Tolkien's religion bothers me.
What about the allegory part that he is the idea
Well,
that he's
because
not
a
a
lot
fan
of
allegory?
morons will be like, "This is a direct allegory for World
Oh,
War II,"
yeah,
and
no.
it's like,
I
no,
agree.
it's not.
So
Okay, I
Or,
thought you were
you
gonna
know-
come after my view of it, but yeah, no, he
No,
directly says he doesn't like
Aragorn
allegory.
is an allegory for Jesus,
Yeah.
which, or Gandalf is also. Actually, everyone is an allegory for Jesus somehow.
Yeah, it's all Jesus.
Everyone's Jesus. He's not C.S. Lewis. Holy fuck.
Yeah,
No.
no, I agree with you. I thought you were gonna say the idea that he's not a fan of allegory because I was like, wait, we
sorry,
can have a
sorry,
little bit about that.
it took me a while to get here. The
We
Imperial
found
was
a black person.
I
a
know
black
they were
fantasy fan.
holding the
Welcome.
orc down, dog. They were holding the orc down. It took me a while to get here. But yeah, kind of Charlie tapped into on that. A lot of stuff, especially with World of Warcraft and stuff like that, unfortunately do depict minorities as the orcs, right? It took them a long time to get a black main character over there on the, and even then it's still very rare to see on the Alliance side, right? And a lot of that takes away from Tolkien's work, right? And you start to see this in a lot of these fantasy like fan bases, right? What everybody should know here, my wheelhouse is 40K, right? And I actually think they do orcs super dope over there, right? They're just sentient fungus, right? They don't really have a personality. They're more bully boys than anything. They don't. I don't know what a black person
They're
in the
culturally
UK would.
British. They speak
Yeah,
that way. Yeah, but go on.
yeah. But when it comes down to it, you'll see a lot of people where the racism lies, right? And the Imperium, right? Where you'll start to see people where, especially like the poster boys, right? the Ultramarines, the guys in the blue, right, who are known to be racially diverse, right? A lot of people will tend to like align with the Black Templar and like hold up like this racist belief that the Imperium is like, nothing but a white man's power fantasy. Actually, Connor calls to this a lot in a lot of his debates against 40K. He won't say a white man power fantasy, but he will say it's a man power fantasy. You know what I'm saying? I'm sure if the conversation was this one, we'd probably hear more of like, hey, this is a white only space, which the Black Templars kind of like they have racism. They're xenophobic, right? But they're not racist, right? But you see a lot of the fan base latch onto this, right? That there has to be a reasoning for that, right? There's a reasoning that they want this to be so true, even though other things in the Imperium show that there's black people, right? Hell, Dawn of War that came out, which is not really tied to 40K at large, right? It's a little offshoot where the story, one of the main characters in there, what's his name? Something Orion, right? Black librarian is one of the highest like you're a psyker, like they just you're so elite that they usually kill psykers, right? But they decided to let you be a part of the Space Marines and fight for part of the Imperium, and he's a black guy, right? But a lot of people won't even acknowledge that, right? They won't even, they'll just say 40K
Yeah,
is white.
Majin, can I just ask you directly, because 40K is sci-fi, but I think it's going to fall under the umbrella for this
There's a lot of
conversation.
fantasy.
I think
Yeah,
it
there's a lot.
falls
It's
under
sci-fi
the
fantasy, I feel
yeah,
like.
it falls under the umbrella of what we're talking about today, which is fine. I asked this to Charlie. I'm going to ask this to you. Do you feel that fantasy spaces, that people who are in fantasy spaces are more likely to be racist than in other spaces?
Hmm. Um, Maybe in the past, right?
Okay.
I will use the early 2000s of when I was playing World of Warcraft, right? And I'm not the most like, I can get a little hood, but I'm over the voice. If I turned this off, you probably would have guessed he was talking to a black man. You know what I'm saying? And it's gotten worse. Yeah, here we go with that. You know what I'm saying?
Worse. Wait
Shit.
a minute.
No, I mean, I code switch worse, right?
Certainly,
Like,
yeah.
yeah. Um, but nowadays, like when I would run up there, I would have to prove to these motherfuckers that I was black. They would start talking that racist shit. I'm like, hey, yo, y'all know y'all got a black guy in here, right? And they'd be like, you're not black. I'm like, I haven't missed a day. Um, and they keep like, what I'm saying. So it always felt like that. I was never really like a part of the crew, you know what I'm saying, until like, nowadays you'll find in these fantasy spaces that it's heavily LGBTQ, you know what I'm saying. There it's a lot different than it used to be, but definitely back in the day I would say it was a little tight around the neck when it came to being a minority in these places, you know what I'm saying. You were definitely the outlier. Now, if that is that because of my own people, you know what I'm saying? I even get scoffed at nowadays when I tell people that I'm into 40K. Like, what? White boy, calm down. When did
Yeah.
you switch sides? But that could also be because they were banned from that for so long, right? There is a reason why black people, when they look at Piccolo, say Piccolo is a black guy. You know what I'm saying? That is conditioning, right? That is absolutely 100% conditioning to be like, yo, if you want any kind of relation to this like fantasy thing, you're going to be the villain. Like you're going to have to until we decide that you're a good guy, like they did with Piccolo.
Yeah, so my only gripe is the connection that it's definitely because of the inclusion of black characters in the art. Because I also played WoW in the early 2000s, and I also played Call of Duty in the early 2000s, which had a way higher concentration of black representation in it, and a way higher concentration of racism in its community. So I think we need to be really careful about drawing parallels of like the reason.
If you
That's
played
my
WoW,
issue with Charlie's point is just that final step. I agree with 90% of everything she said, except for her final conclusions, which is where the scholarliness, I think, kind of ends, and more of her own personal interpretation of the state of things. It's really hard to analyze in a scholarly way, is that, and so it must be the case that it's because of this that this happens.
So could I say, I think that I was not a Call of Duty player because
Yeah, they weren't great to win.
imagine my voice coming up on there.
Yeah, no,
from what
100%.
I've seen, it seems like military shooters, you'll hear the slurs fly. But as a World of Warcraft player, you will run into people who are like, actually, I think black people are biologically inferior to us. You run into like weirdo Nazis.
Trade
You run
chat
into, like,
used to
people
be
who like really
crazy
feel
back
it.
in the day.
Same in military
Yeah.
shooters, though.
Yeah.
Black
Same in
Stew
especially
was
Mil
crazy.
Mil Sims too. Even now, Mil Sims, which have a ton of black people in them, again on the goods, almost exclusively on the good side, because you're usually like fighting on behalf of allied powers against Axis powers. Black people are only good guys in Mil Sims, and Mil Sims have some of the most deeply racist white supremacist groups that play them, and it's like. And they're fighting against Nazis in the games, and they're
but
still
you're invoking the
thinking
idea that
shit.
these video games have stories that are reflecting the ideas of their audience, where there are games where people are like, yeah, I just
Call
want
of
to go
Duty
shoot
did.
shit. Not really. I mean, if you look at it as like, okay, like you can talk about, I liked the
Military
story of
propaganda.
COD 4, COD 5, yeah, sure, but these are not
Base
I don't think
military
these are all at all similar to a fleshed out fantasy world. They're reflections of a reality, and you're also like, okay, like, can you tell me one characteristic trait of Sergeant Griggs from Call of Duty 4?
I mean, yeah, he's fucking badass, dude.
Exactly.
He was short.
You can't.
He
He has
wasn't gonna
nothing.
take your. He wasn't gonna
There's
take
no
your
character.
shit.
It's not a character.
There
it's a
is
guy.
character.
No, there's not. The only character
You literally like,
maybe
I'm gonna
this.
cut off your description of his
Because
character
you're-
and
because
say that you had no description of his
There's no
character.
description of his character, dude. Come on.
He
Like,
is a
you're being-
classic Southern black military member who is gruff, who is hard around the edges, who's gonna treat you kind of
Okay.
like shit, but he loves you deep
Sure.
down.
Okay.
That
Can you
is
name?
a
Can you name another
a
character in the group that's
stereotypically
different
black
than that?
character.
Can you name?
I can't name a lot of Call of Duty characters until you
what
name
about
them for
what
me.
about
and I
The guy
remember
from
them.
Halo.
Is Gaz
Halo.
different from Griggs?
Halo, that's the thing, is these are all kind of the same character, so it's a very
Yes,
stereotypical
exactly. That's
black
what I'm
character
saying.
in a good guy role every time, and you still have a ton of racism in these communities. So I don't just think that it's black guys being good guys makes less racist, black guys being bad guys and not good guys makes more racist.
That is
I
not
don't
the
Well, I
think
think
You
the
know,
that's
argument,
I
just
agree.
real quick, I think the argument here that I have heard that why certain communities attract a certain type, if you will. I take issue with the statement that fantasy groups are just full of racists. I don't think that's true at all. I reject that notion. However, I do think that there are people who try to use it as a vehicle for their racism.
Yes.
I do
100%.
think that there are people who absolutely will try to push and blur the lines of fantasy and say, wasn't Tolkien so right when he talked about how all those mongoloids were just raping and pillaging? Wasn't he just so correct? And like, there's this type that use it as a vehicle, but I don't think it naturally is. So I think they have gravitated towards that to appeal to a younger audience, because let's be real, if you're attracted to fantasy, especially power fantasy, you're going to be younger, at least at first. A lot of people who are older who like fantasy, who like Dungeons and Dragons, they got into it when they were very, very young, right? And that is who there. Again, we have this whole strategy of they're trying to appeal to the young man who feels bereft. We have a loneliness epidemic in the male society, and these people have recognized that, so they go to the places where the young men will be. That's
But
why I think
you see
that
a lot in
you
these
see a lot of
situations.
gravitation towards this.
Like
Yeah.
even in the older lore and stuff like that, I'm gonna use 40K because I feel like 40K is a really good base for like diversity, and a lot of people don't want to give it its credit. I'm like on the 7th book of Horus Heresy, right? And every single time there is a minority, right? They do describe them as being different, right? But they do describe that they come from like a lineage of like Egyptian lineage, or they look like the classic, just so they can give you an idea of it. And it's a lot of that, right? A lot of people in the Lunar Wolves, the Horuses, the main guy that started the shit, weren't white passing people. They were more people that looked like me or darker. You know what I'm saying? But a lot of people will argue. It's like back in the 90s or the late 80s, where you couldn't tell somebody wrestling was fake. You know what I'm saying? They would argue with you with all their passion of life that wrestling was fucking real, right? But like, now we look at it, right? Hey, wrestling was fake as fuck, right? Till this day, people will swear to you that these factions have no minorities in it. They're not a place for that, and they're like almost like they like that R. Kelly meme. I'm trying to put my fucking life here to try to fucking prove it, and like, so why is that, right?
My
like,
struggle,
there has to
my
be there.
struggle is, I think people with minority views, especially hateful minority views, they seek out, even if they have to be inaccurate to do so, ammunition to say, look at popular cultural thing that agrees with me. I actually don't have a minority view. You all actually subtly believe this. My problem is you aid their weaponization of non-racist material. If we were to say, you know what, these Nazis are latching onto 40K a lot, so 40K is racist. You're essentially
It's a
granting
hard
them.
thing to beat. I agree with this.
You're
I
granting
absolutely
them
agree
their
with this.
lie. And
I'll
so
also-
I think the same thing about the orcs and Lord of the Rings is like, if you grant that Lord of the Rings is racist because of how they depict the orcs, you give that ground to the people trying to lie and say that Lord of the Rings is racist.
I don't think
Maybe
Charlie
Disney,
is
I'll let
saying
you
no
go
one
next.
should watch Lord of the Rings, dude. Like, this is clearly this is so
bro,
fucking.
who are you talking
You're
with?
interrupting me,
You
bro!
said
You're
it.
interrupting me! Let me land the plane! Let me land the
Charlie,
plane!
Oh my
Charlie,
God,
I got
you
something
have
to say.
never
Charlie,
responded
Charlie,
to what
I
I
got something to
said.
say. Go ahead.
I made this point earlier. I can't speak to 40K. I have not
It's
explored that at
basically
all.
like
Um,
futuristic.
it's like space. That's where Space
Lord of the
Marines
Rings.
come from,
You got
right?
space
Yeah.
elves,
Yeah.
you got space orcs, you got
So-
space
and I
dwarves.
said this-
It's
I said this
literally
earlier.
with space in front of it, like everything that Lord of the Ring provides.
Right. So I feel like, okay, and this is going to start to involve gender a little bit. And I think that fantasy, because it is so, again,
You're gonna bring up
because
the
our culture.
Femstodes thing? Uh-oh.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know what that
No,
is.
she doesn't know those things. Are you talking male power fan? Let's just hear what she has to say. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
in the popular culture, we have a lot of misconceptions about the medieval era. And I think, like Game of Thrones, people believing that Game of Thrones was historically accurate speaks to that. But it does speak to this again.
I've
this
never heard that, but that's true.
People say it a
Well,
lot. It's very embarrassing. So people dream of this mythic past in which everyone in Europe was white. Men were men and women were women. Rape happened all the time, and there were anime battles everywhere, and it was gritty and insane. And starting since the Victorian era, there was this
Like the Moors
intense
never
desire.
existed.
Yeah, precisely. It's this desire to kind of like connect with and identify this superior whiteness to develop a sense of self. And so I think because fantasy specifically does it does speak to whiteness a lot. Because of it is frequently medieval European, I think that because we have weird baggage about the medieval era, I think that can act as a much it's a better vehicle for becoming a white supremacist than, for instance, like sci-fi, which is more interested in the future and what could be versus the
I'll
past.
find it in it though. Like
Yeah,
a lot of
I
people
disagree. Yeah,
a lot of people forget Robin Hood's like main homie, the guy. Like we could go to the Kevin Connor,
He's a
like
Moor, yeah.
yeah, he was a Moor, and
Yeah.
he was a black man. That was his guy, and he was
Yeah.
very well in the Great Britain while all that shit was going down. So it's like,
Mhm.
hey, bro, how does that exist if there wasn't black people?
Sure, but the point
I
is
guess
that
so.
pointing out the point
Exactly,
is that
exactly.
pointing out racism doesn't mean you're ceding ground by saying that, hey, there's something in this like media at some point that is racist, and it's like, oh, therefore it's so bad that you cannot enjoy it, that you can't take a part
When
of it.
you're
It's saying
wrong,
there
you
are
are ceding
oh, whoa, hey, why are
improper
you
ground.
interrupting me, dude? No, just shut the fuck up. Just let me finish the plane,
No,
bro.
you were not. My issue wasn't your interruption. It was that you were interrupting to argue against the point I didn't make.
I love the fight.
You literally said
I'm arguing
we
against your
shouldn't do
point.
it. You
I'm
said
saying
we
if you're
shouldn't. We
wrong,
said
you're
we
ceding.
shouldn't. Why pointing it out is ceding ground to the white supremacists? It's like, hey, if racism
No.
exists in Lord
Pointing
of
it
the
out
Rings,
inaccurately. is ceding ground.
Sorry, right. I forgot you disagree with the idea that it's racist. So yeah, it's ridiculous because yeah, you can call something racist and not say that it's just this boogeyman of now you can't touch it. I think there are potentially fascistic elements in Warhammer that are actually satirical and criticizing fascism, and yet people who don't understand that will latch onto it in the same way they latch onto Starship Troopers. And it's like, hey, that doesn't mean the media is bad. It just means that you're going to have a higher propensity of people with fucked up views in this ideology because they don't fucking understand it, and that sucks. But that doesn't mean that it's like, oh, don't enjoy it. Oh, we're ceding the ground because we called it like a higher propensity for fascism. Like, it's silly. Like you don't have to reject
yeah,
it.
I mean, it
Let
would
me,
be
let
would
me-
be silly if someone said that just
Let
saying it
me-
as a higher propensity for fascism.
Well, let me
is
make
awful,
a
would be silly.
brave take here, perhaps. Right? I think that actually, sometimes, if it's done properly, it's good to have racism in stories.
Sure.
Let
I
me
think
explain.
Yeah, I
that
don't
you
think
can
anyone disagrees with
explore,
that.
I think it's good to have these settings where you have great degrees of evil in them. And racism, I think, is evil, right? Where you have like an ontologically evil race and things like that, where you have these things. I think it can, and this is where I might disagree with Charlie. Depending on how it's done, it can be very interesting to deal with that. Like, how does one deal with something where you cannot have diplomacy? How does one deal with something where you try to have diplomacy and then you fail because you fundamentally misunderstand what you were dealing with? Because I think the idea of ontological evil is alien to many of us, right? Because we think, well, we're raised, especially on the Christian nation, the notion of everyone can be redeemed, right? A lot of us are raised on that.
Mhm.
The
It
household
has
in which I
conflict
was raised that
with
was
that.
Christian was very firm on the fact that many people are bad
Ontologically
inherently and
evil,
will
yeah.
go to hell.
Yeah,
So I
let's
mean, I don't
let's
know.
not
Have
treat
different
Christianity as
brands.
a
Okay,
monolith.
I'll
Yeah.
grant that. I'll
Yeah,
grant that.
yeah.
But my point here is that even if you have evil in a story, evil exists in a story to be reckoned with, to struggle against, to be an obstacle or a temptation, something that must be overcome in the story. And either the protagonist's failure to overcome that evil, right, leads to horrific actions, or them finally being able to overcome that evil. We could tell interesting stories using archetypes
You're
and all
describing
these
Lord of
things.
the Rings. Yeah, they
And
made a
so,
really interesting story doing just
yeah,
that.
well, if I could finish that, well, that's kind of my point, right?
Yeah.
Is that Lord of the Rings was one of the first to bring the kind of archetypes. Well, not one of the first, but it is probably the most popular first one to bring archetypes into fantasy. These like hero's journey and the concept of that into fantasy literature, and the melding of mythological creatures and things like that with this appeals to us because it does speak to the human condition in a lot of ways. I think
Well, so
that
he wasn't the
fantasy.
first to
Can
do
I
that.
finish my?
I mean, yeah, it's been like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You're the moderator, dude. We're a panel. It's a panel.
My God, I want to talk about a discussion. I'm like, so the point of having this whole conversation is to explore how fantasy literature has influenced and can influence modern society. And I think that one of the things that fantasy does better than other genres is that it allows us to explore the concept of evil. Does anyone
I
disagree?
love no, because me personally love when the elves, no matter what it is, whether it's 40K, Lord of the Rings, World of Warcraft, I love when the elves are a little racist, like they don't fuck with the humans. You know what I'm saying? Like it gives me a little bit more reason to put the hammer to them. You know, when an Eldar sits there and calls me a monkey, it hits me a little bit different. You know what I'm saying? And like, all right, like what? Why you calling me a monkey? That sounds like another word, you know. So yes, I love that, but it always seems like these things aren't like, especially with elves in a lot of genres, right? They're not shunned. They're not treated like the orcs, right? Everybody wants to be a fucking elf. You know what I'm saying? Even though they're hell, the first thing a lady cosplayer is going to do is go get her some pointy ears. You know what I'm saying? And act like a fucking elf when generally elves wouldn't fuck with humans,
That's
no matter
true.
what. So, like, why is it so quick? Like, people are so quick to jump on the racist train when generally elves are racist. They don't identify with humanity at all, but y'all want to be one so bad. You don't see black people really running out there to be elves. You know what I'm saying? It's always the white folks. You know.
I
So
think
I
it's
don't know.
because in their like inception, elves were, at least from Tolkien, they're prettier, they live longer, they're
Yeah.
wiser, they're just
So is
they're
that the
cool.
ugly ones are
Elves are
got to be
so
evil, and the
cool.
pretty ones got
Yeah,
to be the
yeah.
heroes? That's what it is.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
wait, literally, isn't that what it
But
is? The orcs are
also
corrupted
to
elves.
Yes.
Wick's point, I would say that ontological evil is not really the big bad in Lord of the Rings is Sauron, but it is important, and I think it's Elrond that makes this point in the Fellowship of the Ring when they're he's saying that like nothing is born evil. All right, so it is corruption. It is the the seductive power. to have over other people's that everyone time and time again throughout this, throughout the novels must resist. Galadriel must resist, Gandalf must resist, Sam has to resist, Boromir has to resist, Frodo has to resist, Gollum fails
Yeah,
to
I'm getting
resist.
Carmen out of the chat. This fucking dipshit
So
out
again,
of
it's the sense that power corrupts, which is also why the elves are why the orcs are kind of so upsetting, is because it's like, well, there is a theme of like no one is born evil, everyone can be redeemed, and then you throw the orcs and it's like, well, I guess not.
The way
So
the elves treat the dwarves in Lord of the Rings is evil, okay? Like, if
Well,
there
yeah.
wasn't a
Yeah.
third party in that right there, like the humans weren't able to jump into a fight and be like, hey, you guys stop it, right?
You know,
Like,
that's
the
the
elves
point.
and like, but that's the thing, right?
Can I
All of a
just
sudden, the dark ones, though, the ones that are the most different, can't even be invited to the fucking table. Not saying they've tried to be invited to the table, right? But they're automatically the main bad guy, even though you got these elves right here that does drastically fucked up shit, but they're the good guys, right?
Well, that's the point of making the orcs the way that they were, was because we needed a way, like you need a way to tell this story about these people being the good guys, but they do some fucked up shit. Like in a mid diplomacy speech, Aragorn cuts off the mouth of Sauron's head. Like, that's why the fuck did he do that? Because it was made clear you can't negotiate, because these people, this is a dark power that can't be trifled with.
Why?
And well, let me correct
Oh,
one
my
thing.
it's also
bad,
not
my bad,
because
my bad.
he's like
My
born
bad, my
evil,
bad.
he's just a
That
really
was my
bad
fault.
guy.
You know, Elrond also didn't say, there's more specificity to the quote. He didn't say no one is born evil. He said nothing is evil in the beginning. And Tolkien as a whole, throughout all his art, kind of speaks of peoples as peoples. Like, the orc as a people did not begin evil. The orc as a people fell and were corrupted the same way we were talking about. That's kind of the fundamental thing I think you guys have the gripe with, is the idea that in fantasy we probably shouldn't have a people
wrong?
that get corrupted.
Am I wrong?
I don't see
And
corruption.
I'm not.
Go ahead,
I'm
Lee.
by no means. I'm by no means a scholar of Lord of the Rings. So maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. But as I understood it, orcs were tortured elves. So they took elves, they tortured them, and corrupted them,
Yes.
making
Yes,
them.
that's why I
evil.
brought up the Tribes of Ham comparison.
Yes, yes.
I
But
didn't say they made a mistake. I said they were corrupted.
evil by in the inception.
They
And
were
another
corrupted.
example.
were
They
corrupted.
Another
weren't
example.
always tortured. It was sometimes tortured, captured and tortured. Sometimes they just were convinced by Morgoth to join his side
Fair
and were
enough.
thus
But
twisted and
I want to
corrupted.
And
adjust
then
your
got
point that
warped
saying
by the
fantasy is
evil
like
power.
the best like genre
the
for this, because
ring-
sci-fi does really good at this. Like, you know, Borg, Aliens, Terminator are all great ways to explore
wanna
undebatable ontological evil,
finish
and
my-
I don't think. Oh, well, okay. Sorry for talking.
The ring that Sauron forged was evil, right? By its inception. It was the manifestation of evil. And that was what was the struggle, right? The struggle that Boromir faced, right? When he was tempted by the ring, the struggle that Frodo faced and almost succumbed to. I mean, because he did succumb. Let's be clear. At the end, and spoilers,
did.
gang, Frodo succumbed to the evil. He succumbed to the evil. It took a deus ex machina of Gollum biting off his finger, right? I remember the first time I saw Lord of the Rings, gang, and this is a little personal aside, but I'm going to indulge myself, was the British cartoon. I didn't read the books, right? I read them later, but my first exposure was a British cartoon, and I remember the song because it was a musical, basically, because it had so many songs.
Yeah,
I remember the song, "The Frodo of the Nine Fingers and the Ring of Doom," and then you had "Where There's a Whip, There's a Way." You had great songs, great soundtrack, but this whole idea of that was the whole point, is the ring would corrupt everyone. Literally everyone, given enough time, and it took the deus ex machina of the higher power or whatever.
Yeah, and that's why it's really important to levy the Tolkien's kind of dislike of allegory, because it's important to understand that there's multiple interpretations, and so we can talk about this stuff. But some could interpret it. Other Christians generally have really interpreted the ring as sin, like that is sin has things to offer you, but it corrupts, and inevitably you can't just dabble in the things that sin offers you without becoming corrupted over time. And also, Frodo is kind of, to Christian circles, it kind of represents us. It represents us, the sinner. And it's like, we're all going to fall to it at some point. And like, you're right, 100%. It's a deus ex machina. It's just like, but by even through the most evil thing, the most corrupted thing, we can still be saved. in the end, or through Sam, through fellowship, through all these different things, right? And that's why I think when race, I understand the temptation to put race at the forefront. I don't think that's the point of the orcs. Like the idea that the orcs are evil because they're flat-nosed, slant-eyed Mongols just does not read when you read
I don't think
when you
anyone
read
was
the work
saying
as
that.
art.
that was
How are you
that
gonna
was
get
the
on our
way that
cases
he
for straw manning
enhanced
this
their
whole time?
evil
I
and
don't think
Yeah,
that's
differentiated
that's the way he
from them,
invoked
from the good white people.
a similar picture.
So again,
From
there is a correlation between whiteness and good in Lord of the Rings.
correlation,
And
certainly, yeah.
there is a correlation between black and brown and darkness and evil in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. And so
and
it's a
that goes from-
correlation causation issue where it's like, is he really saying that the whiteness of your skin makes you good? Or is he saying that a lot of these good people are also the people who are most civilized and
So-
noble, and so they're not dark because they're not, literally, he describes it in like the nature of hobbits in the foreword of the Hobbit.
When you
Hobbit.
become
He
So
literally
I
says
think
they're
that-
outside more. No, not true, because the Fallowhide hobbits are darker.
That maybe,
Can we stop interrupting the points? I've talked for 45 seconds so far.
You've talked for
No, right now I've talked for 45 seconds.
Actually,
by
This has been
far,
like-
by orders
this-
of magnitude on this panel, you have been given the mic the most.
I'm the only one who disagrees with you, dumb fucks. So yes, I'm going to talk
we
as
don't
much
know
as
what
all
James
of the
has
people on
to
the other
say.
side. Okay,
That's true.
but here you're just wrong. There is not this idea that every time your skin is darker, it's because you're getting more evil in the Lord of the Rings. It's just not true. The Fallowhide
Well, I
hobbits are
didn't
not more
say that.
evil. No, Wick did.
But
the
it could
Fallowhide
be
hobbits
true
are not
Hold
that
on.
evil.
The reason I said that is because it's a common trope in fantasy,
Sure,
not
it's-
just
but-
Tolkien, but in fantasy in general.
mean,
And it
you
was true with
said
the
it in-
orcs.
you said
their
in Lord of the
skin
Rings.
darkened because they were twisted and corrupted.
By fire and darkness, yes. So their skin darkened, yes.
By
So
I'm
evil.
tapping into something that Charlie said because like I'm not that like I've seen everything that y'all have seen. With I've not read the books obviously, but I've seen all the media for Lord of the Rings and whatnot, right? But there is to be said, like Charlie brought this up when they were talking about their orc friends and having a comment about like having a homestead and this, that, and the third. They did want lives. You know what I'm saying? They pointed this out, right?
Yeah.
Going back to my argument, right? Even if there's beef amongst the alliance, right? The humans, elves, dwarves, hobbits, and stuff like that, to the point where like, yo, I would wipe you out if I could get a chance to wipe you, but we're civil now, right? We don't allow the ones that are extremely different from us. We don't even try to understand them. We don't, and I hate that. I hate this argument generally because, like, we should all be, accepting of demons and we should reach out to her. I hate that argument,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
An alien pull up to this planet, he's getting done in. All right.
Yes, sir.
But like at the same time, I'm gonna use it here. Is like, why didn't nobody reach out to see, like, yo, maybe we could bring the orcs in on some other shit. Maybe turn the forces of Sauron against him. Like, yeah, we don't really fuck with him like that, but they obviously ain't fucking with this shit either.
Because that wasn't the story, right? Like, you can write a story about that, and it could be an equally good or even better story. That wasn't the intention of this story. Was to tell about the very different, diverse people on the
But
good
they did
side
it with
coming
all the
together.
ones that were pale skinned. You get that, right? Even when that's
All
where
the
it
No,
goes
Yeah.
not
back.
all of them
Like-
were pale skinned.
But, like,
No,
you know
it
what
was-
I'm
all
saying?
of them in the Fellowship were very pale skinned.
Like the dwarves and orcs.
Admitted he had
like,
brown
the-
skin,
or
so
not
that's
the-
not true.
The
But
dwarves and the
From
elves
Tolkien,
didn't
we know what
get
we meant.
along, bro.
We meant.
It was like the same beef the Alliance had against the orcs, the elves and the dwarves had with each other,
No.
bro.
yes, I get it. And they work together, right? But here's the thing, right? When you have to talk about the different layers, like you guys are again, race was like the idea of real life races was just not the forefront of this art. It just wasn't. When you talk about Tolkien too, you have to remember he's also inspired by the Bible quite a bit. The Bible as a story, and the Bible throughout a lot of it depicts paleness as a way to show nobility and show not because white made you better, but because if you were noble, you didn't have to go out and work in the fields. You didn't have to go out and brave the wilds.
Right.
The people
so,
who are
so
less
the better
noble,
people had white skin, and the worse
Not
people
better.
had
Granted,
skin.
like, it
those
was
who
written.
didn't.
it was
You're
written in a
saying
way
they're
that-
better. No,
It was written in
hold
a way
on,
that
hold on,
probably
hold on. No,
wasn't-
she's wrong. Stop interrupting me. She's wrong. So, Ruth, like certain people in the Bible were described as tan and leathery, and that was to show, and they were the best people. They were the goodest people. They
Because
just
they came
weren't
from that
nobility.
area.
They just weren't nobility. Nobility doesn't mean better. Nobility just means you have more means in that time. You're the one tying that to better. The whole point of a lot of these stories is to show that no matter what means.
Guys, after this panel, I'm going to talk about the word retard and a discussion someone reached out to me. This guy's retarded.
Wasn't making them darker. Like, that is how the Bible describes it. That was one of his inspirations in writing the fantasy, and he describes it similarly in the fantasy to the way
Wasn't
they're
Aragorn pretty
described in the
white,
Bible.
but wasn't he also a ranger?
He was a
Yeah.
ranger, but no, he had
was
had his.
white.
He was white, but white does not mean you have pale skin like the elves did. He did not have
Like-
as pale skin as the elves did.
Like, we could just say the story was written in a time where this could be true, where racism was that, you know what I'm saying? People thought of black people or anybody of a skin of color as less than, right? And they never had the
I mean, he
foresight
didn't even
to
describe them as
see
black,
in
so
the
no.
the see into the future that we would be discussing this, or the world would be what it is nowadays. You know what I'm saying?
I mean,
And
I
that we
have to
could
say
be
no,
sitting
because
here
he didn't describe them as
classified.
black. They weren't black in the books.
I would say so.
Hold on, real quick. I
Tolkien-
wasn't done though. There's many of cases that even in modern writing where they actually try to turn this on the head. One of my favorite books from Brandon Sanderson. It takes place in this place called the Cosmere. It's called the series is called Stormlight Archive. Okay, and in this story, right, a lot of the people like everybody there is my skin tone, right? Everybody is dark skin, right? But what they separate everything is between the dark and light eyes, right? Light eyes being people that are imbued, that are usually of royalty, usually sit like on a council of some government and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And dark eyes being the working class. Not saying the dark eyes are poor or anything like that, right? But you're never going to be a light eyes. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
the poorer, yeah.
Like, but you there's like, dark eye surgeons, right? Generally, when the story progresses, and I'm not trying to give any spoilers, everybody in here needs to go read this book. It's one of the best book series out there. Generally, a lot of those light eyes, right, are nepo babies, right? They got power handed down to them, and they're dumb, they're corrupted, they're fighting like it's Game of Thrones, right?
The
Eventually-
Hassans. Don't say that. to
Something like
Star
something. I don't know. I ain't shooting no strays at this, right? But I always find it funny that they use this, right? They try to get everybody to lean towards like, oh, the light eyes and this, and that, right? But when the story like blossoms, right? It's the dark eyes that are the true heroes of the story. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do want to ask because again, I
Hey, James,
have a
jump
time
in. Just
limit.
jump down their throat, James. Just say it.
Yeah,
Just say
James.
it
I
loud.
thought
but I do
you
want to
responded.
ask James first, but we are winding down, and this is the last question. It's going to be a quick one, and then we're going to close. We're going to go closing statements. We're going to tell people where they can find you. Thank you for the donations, all that. We're going to
Let him speak.
But the last question is: we talked a lot about Tolkien tonight. What modern fantasy, either series, author, book, what have you, do you think is best? Maybe not representative, but what do you think is the best kind of most interesting work today in fantasy literature? And I'll start. It's really easy. Anything by Joe Abercrombie. Specifically, start with the First Law trilogy. You read him, he's got gritty, dark fantasy. I think, bar none, he is the high watermark of modern dark fantasy. I think everyone should read it. And he does deal with racism and evil and slavery and all that shit. And he does it in a very interesting way. I think you all should go read it. First Law trilogy, that's my recommendation. Soy Pill, what do you got?
I defer my time to James. He's been waiting a while.
Oh, that's sweet of you. Thank you. Yeah, I guess I was. Well, I was just going to mention one thing that is a kind of it's a kind of challenge for the conversation because it is a ubiquitous point almost universally with light and dark kind of having this universal idea of something either being more safe or more clear versus something being unclear and dangerous, just like a reference to like the morning and the dark, right? There's you can even find this in like Indonesian performing art, like in regards to like something being darker being like potentially dangerous and light being clear, or even indicative of like royalty because they're not working out, they're not some of the blue collar workers. But the thing is that it's the challenge of it. The conversation is that it's topped on with this issue of colorism and what that symbolizes IRL, right? So trying to parse between that ubiquitous issue or just element, maybe not even issue, just an element, and then make it clear that there's something different there. I can see why there is like a call for, let's say, if you wanted to add a Moorish character to The Lord of the Rings, something like that. That makes it more clear that you're not always equivocating light and dark with a colorism issue, but more to something general. That's what I wanted to say.
Okay, no fantasy recommends?
Oh, no, I'm so sorry. Oh, my God.
Oh, you know he's got some.
Oh, my God. Yes. If you ever have, Morkborg is so good. If you've ever read The House of Leaves, for example, or if you've ever been interested in that, this is one of those novels, it's a book, it's a TTRPG, but the thing is that it becomes its own story that it makes from a visual point of view. You have splashes of then different like graffiti and then just very grunge art, and then you have the text going into the corners of the pages, and then you even have secret messages on here. Like here's one of the things. This says Morkborg, or I don't know if it's reversed, but it says Morkborg on here. If you run your finger across here, there's an actual code here that you don't find until you actually touch this and the light hits it just right. And then it's referring to a psalm passage, and the psalm passage for this book is how the world ends. And that's a mechanic for the game. So, Morkborg, that's my recommendation.
Okay, well, great recommendation. What do you got for us? Let's say Majin.
I've already shielded a little bit, but I'll go back to it. Anything from Brandon Sanderson. He has created this universe called the Cosmere. I would recommend a lot of people start with the Mistborn series. It's a lot shorter than Stormlight. Stormlight books as an audiobook, like it starts off at like the 40, like ends at like 45 hours, and then the fifth book that just came out is like over like 60 hours. It is a commitment, but the Mistborn books are a little bit like around 20 to 30 hours. Great story. Actually, the Mistborn series follows a female lead protagonist. I used to have a little bit of a problem with that, but this story is so dope and so well done. I was like, yo, I fuck with this story.
Those women, right? Are ruining
Hey,
everything.
man, it's a male power fantasy world, bro. You know, I need that. But my favorite series is the Stormlight Archive series, which follows this guy, which has slavery, has all the racism and all that, the separation, not based off the skin color, but the status of the eyes, like I said. Um, really good story. I would recommend anybody. Matter of fact, if anybody in here knows Doobie, he highly recommends this book too. Yeah, definitely check it out.
Check it out. Jeptin, what you got?
So I love you, James. Every time you've spoken, I think everybody's just gotten happier. Yeah, I guess as closing points, I wish we would have gotten to like some of the modern fantasy stuff, because I think honestly getting into like modern girl fiction and like smut fantasy would really get to the core of what me and Charlie's real disagreement is, which is the idea that writing has a mission just generally to improve and things like that. But my core point is it doesn't. I think there's room for every type of story, and I think some stories are really well told by making even a lot of aspects of them very black and white, because it's just a matter of math, right? The more nuanced you want to make one part of your story, the more rigid you got to make other parts of your story, unless you necessarily want to write 13 books, which is cool too. It's okay to make black and white, and even if that includes some kind of racial stereotyping, even though technically the elves are, the Uruk-hai are elves, so it's kind of like,
Maybe
the elves can be bad too.
For you another day.
Yeah, well, I don't read them, so I don't have a lot of like potent stuff, like in terms of critique, but anyway.
I don't read the smutty stuff.
No, I figured you wouldn't. I think
Court of
I would
whatever.
Yeah, I think I would support its existence more than you, because I think for the same exact reason we disagree on this panel.
I mean,
is what I was
it's
saying.
okay to exist.
Yeah.
I just think it's like poop and shit, but that's okay. You know?
No, yeah, and so that would be a cool conversation to have one time, if maybe we want to have like the modern fantasy and is it going the right direction panel. That'd be sick, Wick.
Yeah,
but
that was supposed to be this panel.
That was this panel.
I know.
I'm so
sorry.
But my recommendations for books, I actually am going to jump away from pure fantasy, because I think there have been pretty good recommendations, and I read kind of a potent mix of fiction. Orson Scott Card, I'll bring up another Mormon author in the theme of Brandon Sanderson. Tales of Alvin Maker series. It is not complete, so if you don't like reading things that don't have an ending yet, don't read it. He wrote Ender's Game, which is my
It's like
favorite
7
book.
books though, right? In that series.
It is.
I
Yeah,
love Ender's Game.
he wrote Ender's Game. It's my favorite book of all time. But I think
I
his
even
best
liked the movie.
series. I did too. I think his best series is The Tales of Alvin Maker. It's awesome. It is pretty rigid Mormon allegory, so if that bugs you and you don't want to support it, don't support it. But it's like Mormon folklore. Like he is creating like
absolutely.
Mormon mythology. It
great.
is very cool. It's very nice.
It's Joseph Smith in a fantasy world, but yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It's
crazy.
super cool.
Okay.
And it plays with race in really cool ways too, which is fun.
recommends.
This is more sci-fi fantasy, but hear me out. Lesbian necromancers in space.
I thought you didn't read smut.
Tasman Mirror. No, they don't fuck in space.
Lesbians
I
are
mean,
just
okay.
automatically smut wick? Okay.
Yeah, what the
Look,
fuck?
hold on. If you
I hope
asked me
so.
to bet, if you just read me that title and you put money and you asked me to bet, like, is this a smut book? I would have bet it was a smut book, and you would too, and you know why. Okay.
Oh, that's fair. But there isn't. Well, no, there's not really sex. But lesbian necromancers in space, Tasman Mirrors, Locked Tomb series.
Oh,
I
wow.
also have that reading list, by the way. If you wanted to read more about race and fantasy. But also at the end I put some just like general, if you are interested in fantastic theory, these are 2 books that I had to read in grad school. So I can
Can you
share
link
my
that to me in
screen.
the DMs and I can share the screen and people can go through it.
I just wanted to put that. Remember, when it comes to space women,
Oh wait,
all right,
actually let me
Wick
just
plays the Sisters of Battle, space nuns. All right, they need to be
space.
Puritans.
I like the
Yes,
whole idea
they got to
of
be
religious
pure.
orders in space that protect humanity. I don't know. It's pretty cool. So.
I'll link that actually in here.
Are we doing closings? Because I will talk if I thought we were just giving book regs.
Give you a closing statement. Don't worry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I assumed.
You got other book regs, so throw them out there. I'm typing them in.
I'll do my recs right now, which is I recently read the Children of Time series, only because there's this part where a spaceship full of monkeys catches on fire, and that's hilarious. But it's a fun sci-fi story about colonizing other planets and hyper intelligent spiders. So
Children
I would
of
recommend
Time,
this.
Children of Ruin, Children of Memory. Great series.
Yep.
Read it all. No, I agree. While we wait for Charlie to get her link, there are plenty of fantasy.
Oh, sorry. I
stories.
just copy and pasted something in chat.
Okay, well,
actually, I can just share my screen. I'll just share my screen.
Same way you did with the clip, right?
Yeah.
You know.
So I just want to make sure my name wasn't going to be on.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah, but people might know your name's Charlie.
Oh no! Fuck.
It's crazy. Okay, you can look at the list, gang. Take a good look. Check it out.
All right.
Okay. But yeah, I'm a big bookworm. I've read probably in my life, if not 1,000, close to it. Fantasy and sci-fi stories of various lengths and various quality, various types. I think
I got
that
one more book after you.
Yeah, by far, some of the best stuff I've read has been the modern stuff. I do think that modern fantasy has some problems. I think it has become kind of like gray gooed, and what I mean by that is it's all kind of the same.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a problem with media in general. Again, I think that if you want a great recommendation that's not finished, and I hope it one day does become finished because it's a great series. The first book was amazing, one of my favorite books of all time. The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. That whole series is only 2 so far. There's a 3rd coming out, but the Name of the Wind, and then the second is A Wise Man's Fear. Beautiful literature, beautiful books. Joe Abercrombie's great. Those are my 2. Do you got another one real quick?
Yeah. I know this is since it's a little bit on the conversation, but it's past its prime. but this book especially from the World of Warcraft
Oh
series,
yeah.
Arthas, and it's written by Christy Golden. She did a lot of the old extended universe for the Star Wars universe, which is phenomenal. The shit that we can't say is canon anymore. But
Which is
this one
why
she got
Star Wars sucks now.
yeah. She wrote a lot of that, and with this book, she got New York Times bestseller with it. It adds on to
Guys, stick around. I do want to talk to everyone about two things. One very short, one maybe slightly longer after this panel, and it's almost over. So
Warcraft 3, I assume. Like even the time the fight between Arthas and Uther, right? It adds another layer. It drags that fight out, and it's pretty gory and gruesome. Like how they get pretty descriptive on how Arthas kills Uther. I thought it was dope as shit. I recommend it. Y'all should read it.
Awesome.
I would
Okay,
say,
with that,
so, oh,
go ahead, please.
I was gonna say, someone in my chat said, "Wow, it's terrible writing." I'm gonna agree with Majin here. Christy Golding, consistently, War Crimes is like one of the best. That's
Oh
my
my
favorite
god,
one.
War
She did
Crimes was
War Crimes
insanely
so fucking
good.
good.
I got that
Most
right here too.
Yeah. I have a box of my World of Warcraft books at my mom's house, but I think her and Jeff Grubb, who did The Last Guardian, Christy Golden, Jeff
Really
Grubb,
good story. Yep.
fantastic. WoW writers.
Yeah, I guess that would be my second recommendation is if you think like video game books around video game IPs are the same quality of writing as what's in the video game, please
highly
rewrite that
mistaken.
expectation. World of Warcraft books were probably some of the books other than Orson Scott Card books that got me into reading. Same with the Halo
Me
books.
too.
There
Halo,
are really
yeah.
incredible fucking Halo and WoW books.
Have you read the Doom books?
Doom?
No,
Yeah, check them
No.
out.
I will.
Actually, interesting. I honestly, I have a love-hate relationship with it because it took like Doom in a different direction than I wanted it to be taken, but the way they took it was fine. And well written, an interesting story. I just wanted it one thing, and I was given another. That's my fault. But gang, we are going to end tonight's show. So first of all, what do we got coming up? Tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern, I'm going on to Give Me a Break, Admiral Gibbs panel, and we're going to be talking about why the left
gang.
lost. What's the
Love
I
matter
will
it.
with-
also be there.
And
Oh yeah, there's a lot of the same.
And the soy pill.
Yeah, we're gonna have a lot of repeat offenders. I didn't invite them though. Like
Repeat offenders,
know,
bros.
but no, it'll be great. It'll be at 6 p.m. Eastern. Then Monday, at a little later at 9, I am going on the Raging Tomato. I'm going to be teaming up with Pisco, and we're going to be debating the Misfit Patriot and Sean Farash on free speech
Good
and
luck,
whether or not
buddy.
Trump and the Trump admin is the greatest threat to free speech we've seen in America in our generation. I say yes. They'll be fighting with me and saying no, I assume.
I got a
If
headache
I
we'll
could
get
say
to-
hearing you
something
describe
about that
panel.
Raging Tomato the last time with you two, you guys are the most Chad stoic, manliest men on the planet.
Go
Take
ahead.
all that credit. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, no, we yeah, the last time we went on, me and Soy Pill teamed up and it wasn't close. We
What was the
It wasn't
panel about?
it was
Masculinity
on
and gender roles.
masculinity
Those
and-
people
and
are so
gender
brain
roles.
dead. As much as
And
we
they
argue,
hard
Jeff,
I
clap.
watch that
you
one.
are
It's
leagues
a
ahead
hard
of these
clap.
We were
people.
arguing with hate defenders. So
Oh yeah, I'll send you guys. I can send
Okay,
you guys a
that's
write up
easy.
I did on that shit,
Yeah,
but
it
you
was
have
easy.
to not share it with anyone because it's
but,
got my
but,
real
but
name on it.
anyway. And on the 23rd, it's not set in stone yet, right? But I should be going back on Tim Pool again to debate free speech.
Better
And
put
so
your fucking
check me
hood
out
on.
there. That'll be fun. And we got some great other shows coming up next week. I just haven't quite gotten all the guests yet and all the times yet, but we will get them. I want to give each of these lovely individuals a chance to shout out their channels. And any final thoughts? We're going to start with Soy Pill. We're going to end with Charlie.
Cool.
Soy
I read
Pill,
a whole
go.
closing. I find it ridiculous that we started off agreeing that Tolkien did invoke Victorian racism in his novels and whether or not that's fine, and somehow moved to no, that's not actually what he was doing at all. I think the best parts of Lord of the Rings could all still be there without the invocation of orcs or Easterlings as a specific race. I think that nothing doing so has fostered a sense of racism in the community, as seen by the collective bitch fit when Rings of Power put black elves and dwarves in the show, and that show was bad. It had nothing to do with black elves or dwarves. Ontologically, evil races can be okay. I just don't think they should clearly reflect a real life race. I'm the Soy Pill. I make videos about stuff. Please come watch them.
Go watch him, gang. Links to all these people except for Majin because he surprise joined are in my YouTube channel. Click the links, give him a follow. James, please.
I'm James. I'm the multiculturalist. James, thanks for having me, Wick. It's always fun to attack with you and everybody else. Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of issues that just simply seem to be in different wheelhouses of conversations, and there's a lot of abstract terms that have implications of what you're then talking about, which is why I think it touches a lot of nerves in different areas. Yeah, the same. Like I recommend watching Legal Eagle's video on this stuff. I think he has a really good perspective for most of it. It's the idea that you can have something that's like ontologically evil, like a Zerg or a robot or a Terminator or something like that. But once you dial that up, that what was it? That sliding scale, and it starts having different aspects of cultural coding, IRL cultural coding. That's when you have to raise your eyebrows a bit and say, what is the influence we're giving here? Besides that, yeah, go check out my YouTube channel. It's I just made a dragon video. It's really long. Also, if you're looking for cool representation and everything, Pathfinder has the Mwangi expanse. Really cool because they have dwarves with rainbow beards.
I love
Check
this
it
guy.
out,
This guy's
gang.
great.
Check him
James
out.
should
He's
have
a great
talked more.
guy. Give him a follow. Give him some love. Check out his YouTube channel. Check out his Twitter. It's all great. Majin, any final thoughts?
No, this is a great conversation. Again, I hope a lot of y'all check out Sanderson's work. It's really good. Also, I hope a lot of y'all get into like the deeper lore of 40K. That's my wheelhouse. You guys can find me. I haven't streamed in a while. I mostly just pop up on either Wix, Gibbs, and occasionally Prime stuff to throw in my 2 cents. But you can find me. I do stream on Twitch at Majin BMac, MACC. On top of that, a lot of my content, the main reason I haven't streamed is because like computer games are getting a little intense, like, and I can't do both, you know. But I
Super
do
chat this
plan on
man. Get him
I
a
do
graphics
plan.
card.
I'm on a laptop. It's even worse than that.
Oh.
But a lot of my content I am going to be focusing in around when I do come back. The 40K tabletop. I do want to have a series here with Wick where we play maybe Gibbs or anybody else that's interested in playing 40K on Tabletop Simulator. I want to put together a conquest, a crusade league. It's like Risk combined with 40K games. It usually takes a couple months, and I want to stream that. So hit me up, hit Wick up, anybody like that. Deuces.
Okay, thanks for being here. Really appreciate you. Jeptam, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just respond to the closing statement that was directed right at me. Yeah, my initial thing was more of just like conceding for the sake of continuing conversation, sort of an even if there were some of those themes, it would still be okay, which I agree with. I just also disagree with the fact that it's there, but I know there was just no conversation to be had about that because it's all how big of a logical leap you're willing to take in terms of whether or not he was being Victorian era racist in the book. So, anyway, my main point this whole time is that obviously I think the vast majority of people that read Tolkien's work do not even consider the idea of like real allegory to race as a main point of it or even like a significant side point of it. And so it's okay to have those as a story vehicle, as long as kind of what James was clarifying, as long as it's clearly a story vehicle and it's not clearly intended to be an allegory to a real life race to hurt them. And I think that is the case for Lord of the Rings. I think that's the case for a lot of really black and white evil races in fiction. That being said, I really value the same thing Charlie values in the sense that I do appreciate and like that there's a wider variety of stories now and that people of color have better fantasy for them written now and that there's a lot more fantasy being written specifically for those audiences now. That's also awesome. I don't want anyone to think they have like a friend in me if they're the people who are like, I hate anything centered around a woman or I hate anything centered around black people. I don't agree with that. I think that stuff is awesome too. I don't have a channel. I also just hop on debates, but Wick hasn't needed me in a while because I'm usually the conservative that argues with all the Trumpers, and he hasn't had those kinds of panels lately. So
They're conservative?
hell yeah, baby.
We get we.
Also,
this is,
West Coast, Best Coast. Me, I think Charlie and Magin are better than all of you.
Okay, fair
And
enough.
Soy
I'm
Pill.
on the West Coast.
Let's
Soy
give it-
Pill's West Coast too. Then all
let's-
four of us are better than all.
Let's
I'll
give it
find
to
common ground there.
give it to Charlie to close us out and end us on a strong note. Go ahead.
My head hurts so bad. I had fun though. This was fun. I haven't been able to argue fantasy in quite some time, probably not since grad school,
Try
or
and give you
not
more
with
opportunities if
people
you want. Go ahead.
speaking with me to do so. Normally, it's me screaming at my chat. So thank you for having me on, and I appreciate everyone, sharing their thoughts and participating. I still think I'm right. I'm Enemy Charlie everywhere. I'm mostly on Twitch. And you should read Fantastic Theory. Get into theory. It's fun. People do whole academic, breakdowns and dissertations and all your favorite nerd shit, and it's a blast. It's so much fun. Read it. Look at my list. Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
One
Well,
last quick
thanks all
thing.
for being here. We love you. We'll see you tomorrow, 6 p.m. Well, bye-bye, everyone. Bye.
All right, guys, I have to talk to you about two things, and then I'm going to hop off and watch the new episodes of Andor. Let me go to my intermission screen right here. Turn my webcam back on. All right. So, Mildly Muscular Mom, you're in the Bay Area? Fuck yeah. Okay, two things. One, I saw people in chat. I couldn't address this at the time because we were talking about... David Kern asks me $2. Thank you. Hey, Soy, what's your favorite girl fiction? You mean like smut? I don't know. I'm sure if I read Twilight, I could enjoy it to some degree. Look, Nazis are not ontologically evil, okay? The idea that they are monsters, that there are these only this pure evil is a dangerous idea that implies that you can't become that. We're seeing this happen in real time as people within this country are now promoting ideas of mass and horrific violence against other races and groups of people, and they are not ontologically evil people. They are convinced into these things as a holy propaganda machine that allows people to desensitize, dehumanize, and become these evil people. So I hate the idea of anyone saying that Nazis are ontologically evil. One, because there were plenty of, first of all, most Germans in the country at the time were Nazis. Plenty of them tried to fight back against it. But two, the people who were evil Nazis, which is, most of them, are not born that way. Okay, this is something that they were fostered into, and I don't like the idea that, oh well, they're evil and we're not. No, you could absolutely become that given certain circumstances, and you have to be aware of this. This is a bad thing. You have to look at how do people dehumanize other cultures. Why would I think this is okay for certain people, not for other people? We're all capable of it. So no, ontologically just means inherently, oh, they were born that way, they were born evil. That said, everyone in my chat is ontologically gay. All right, second thing, and this is a little broader of a point, and you guys might cancel me for this. The word retard as a slur for an ableist slur that people use. I do it sometimes in my videos. Some people do call me out for this. I have someone reached out to me by email about this very recently, actually this morning. I think it is a autistic member of my audience, which might be most of them. And I'm not going to read what they said or their name. However, I do want to read my response to them because this is my current position on calling people retarded, which you've probably heard me do and something that I do. Let me find it. Okay, so essentially they said, hey, I am autistic. I sometimes get upset when I hear people called this, and, I understand that. This is what I said. This is my basic position. You guys can tell me if this is awful. This makes me a bad person. I'd love to hear it. And I can be, have my mind change on this. And I, however, do not view this the same as racial slurs or any of these other things. So I said, basically, my philosophy on that word is that it, along with every other formally medical terms used to describe people who had mental impairments, either become outdated scientifically, like retarded. No one calls mentally disabled people retarded anymore. There are more specific categories, or are used disparagingly. So they're either become outdated scientifically or are used disparagingly so that people feel the need to change them. I've had similar gripes aimed at me for saying stupid, dumb, idiot, moron. So people have called me out and said, you can't say those things. That's disparaging to the mentally handicapped people. And it seems to me that is a downward spiral where calling someone some sort of word that indicates mental impairment is always going to be offensive, and the goalposts will keep being moved, which doesn't make much sense to me. When I use that word, I use it literally in the way to mean slow. That is why they were called retarded. It wasn't because they were like, haha, you're retarded. It was because your brain, they said, oh, your brain is slower. Obviously, this is medically inaccurate. Now we have all sorts of things. We say, oh, you have autism, you have Asperger's, you have Down syndrome. There's all sorts of different stuff. No one says mentally retarded medically anymore. However, that is what it was originally meant. Though, as someone on the spectrum, I am on the spectrum, I know it has been used against me in a way that can hurt. So I don't like that it hurts people. I don't like when people hear this and they get really upset about it. That said, I think there's lots of things that, even if I think it's okay to say, people will get hurt when they hear it. Especially when this person, I said, you care enough to support me and reach out. I have made it a habit to tone back. I try not to use it as much as I used to, especially in high school. But I personally find that these words specifically, I am constantly policing my language and juggling plates to make sure that the word of the day isn't being said. And for this category, my current stance is I don't like hopping on this train where every few months I'm no longer supposed to say XYZ word to call someone unintelligent. I know that's disappointing to hear. I understand if that makes you not want to watch me anymore. And maybe I'll be convinced otherwise in the future. But at the moment, I'm pretty peeved with this and that and this tone policing. So yeah, if you guys have a resource for me that really like maybe might change my mind, I'm totally willing to read it. I think in terms of calling people like slow or stupid or idiot or retarded, I understand people getting upset about it, but like sometimes it's just a very fitting word. And I have like had every variation of unintelligent being like the only acceptable one be called out for, oh no, that's insulting to differently abled people. You say, hey, no one can say retarded. Everyone calls it the R slur. No one says it out loud. Now suddenly people are calling each other Down syndrome or something, which is like the medically accurate term, but like they're using it to disparage people. If anything, we don't call mentally retarded people retarded anymore. We call them, oh, you have Down syndrome. Oh, you have Asperger's. You have autism. So if anything, they shouldn't be upset by it. I know that's a stupid argument, but it's like we're moving away from comparing someone to someone who is mentally disabled using that specific word. So I don't know. I'm currently still going to be using it, just not as much because I understand some people don't like it. Let's now read the chat and tell me how much of an asshole I am for saying that. Except for Senators, who gives me the R-word pass. Thanks, buddy. So are you left-leaning or centrist? I am progressive, sock dem. I dislike the context and aggression it was used in rather than the words themselves. That's fair. I understand you're basically saying that their ideas are this word. Yes. Fox Scoot, like actually medically diagnosed brain damage. No, that's out of context. I don't know what you're saying. Connor Mason says, I think I pretty much agree. I don't have an issue with its use, and I'm certainly not neurotypical. Can we say spastic? I've gotten people on my case for saying spastic. They're like, don't say that. Uncommon soy mid-take. Fair enough. Can we say downy? No, that's much worse. I would never call someone a downy. Capital MC says unsubbed. Fair enough. Do I like Tolkien? Yes, I like Tolkien. Did you come to the stream too late? Yes, you did. Sorry. By the way, guys, from now on, I'm not putting the VODs on the main channel. They're automatically unlisted. You can find them there, but they'll all be on the Soy Pill Streams channel. So I think like any other disparaging term, the intent matters a lot. Yes. By the way, I would never call a mentally handicapped person retarded. One, because it is always used to infer that this person who is not mentally handicapped is making an argument so stupid that they are mentally handicapped. The R slur specifically is bad because it's a slur, but actually the entire class or concept, something worth removing from your language. I'm not sure I understand the argument there. I think it's not cool to use autistic as an insult personally. I, who is someone who does very autistic things because they are autistic at certain points, will call out my friends who are autistic behavior if it is a thing that I think is bad. For example, when I'm trying to enjoy a video game and they bring me a Excel spreadsheet of the min-maxed best possible things instead of enjoying the game itself, that is a consequence of their autism, and I'll be like, oh, why did you autism ruin this game? However, I don't think you should go around calling people autistic when you think they did a thing that is bad. I am calling out their specific autistic trait, which I am totally fine with people doing to me as well. Don't say this never works. Yeah, I mean, that's different though. I mean, like people tell me don't say the N-word and it's very easy for me to not say it. Not because you told me to and it's like, oh, well, I have to do it because you said, because I acknowledge that I think that one is much more harmful and direct and has a very specific meaning. Oh, BoxFox, thank you for clarifying. As a certified retard with brain damage, I will use whatever words I damn well please. More power to you, buddy. R slur was always used to dehumanize certain people medically and casually in a way stupid and idiot weren't. I completely disagree. I think that, first of all, retarded was a medically induced term, not meant to dehumanize. I mean, to say anything but the people that were used, I mean, I'm sure there were exceptions to this, but medically they would call them retarded because they're like, hey, their brain is slower. That's what to retard means. It comes from French, I think. I know it's been used disparagingly, obviously, but it's not. It wasn't incepted as a way to disparage people with mental handicaps. I replaced retarded with smooth brain because it's only racist against koalas. Yeah, that's good. I like Knuckle Dragger as well, although I have been called out for that one as well. Uh, Game of Thrones Valerians. Holy shit, Ginger Ale. I never realized that the Valerians were an Aryan allegory. I think that's probably true. What do I think about neopronouns as a whole? At worst, they're annoying and slightly inconvenient. I would rather just say they, them, he, or she. But if I know someone and they ask me to say it, I'll do it. Whatever. Not a big deal. I don't know why everyone's fucking upset about it. Using chud as an insult. I don't like using chud because the people who normally say chud are just super cringy leftists, and I don't want to throw my bag in with them. Mice also have smooth brains. Our slur means slow. It's used in the engineering world. Yeah, I use retarded when I was an engineer all the time. It's like, oh, this, like some retarded motor or something. And it's not like I'm trying to disparage it or compare it to a mentally disabled person. Is because it was slow. But yeah, you could say slow. The R word has always just been the punchier way to call someone stupid. It's all ableist at the end of the day, but completely get people not wanting to hear the R word. I agree. I understand it. What do I think about the Numenorians? It's good. I hate them all. It's good they all got washed away. My only exposure to them was the Lord of the Rings show, which I didn't like. If you were a gorilla, do you think you could beat the 100 men? If I was the gorilla, yeah, because I would outsmart them, because I'm built different, but not in hand-to-hand combat. I'd figure something out. I didn't have it in my vocab to start. That's why it's hard to not say N-word. Oh, well, okay. No. I had the N word very much in my vocab for a very long time with a soft A because at my high school, it was the colloquial way to talk to people. Everyone replaced the word dude with the N word because they all were copying the black kids. And I've probably said it every day, dozens of times. I don't do it anymore, obviously. However, it's not that I'm easily able to transition away from using it that way because I never had it in my vocabulary. It's because I realized just how hurtful that specific one is to a wide variety of people, where I think the word retard is not nearly to the same degree as bad. Was this debate fun for you or just frustrating? It was a little frustrating, but it was also a lot of fun. And also, for some reason, my most viewed stream, I guess probably because of all the new subscribers, though, not because of the debate topic. Building on pronouns, what is your opinion on gender as a concept? Would you be okay with the idea of it going away? I mean, I think there are some things about gender that are inherently going to just always be tied to sex, but like gender roles, if you've seen my other debates, not a big fan of them. I think you can just have good behavior, virtuous behavior promoted to everyone. I use retarded in this definition to be smart enough to do and understand better, but choosing not to. That's usually when I call someone retarded. I agree, Alex. Wuten. Is that German? See, I don't use that word, and I'm blacker than Drake. That's good. I think you shouldn't use the N-word if you don't want to, and most people should never say it. Natalie, serious question. How well do you think you could do against a gorilla 1v1? I'd get fucked unless I had a weapon. Steve says, I don't care for the R-word as an insult. It feels like a 12-year-old's vocabulary. That's fair, Steve. However, I talk like a 12-year-old sometimes. I love saying poopy, butt, dick, fart, all the dumb stuff, all right? Yeah, mildly muscular, that's a really good way to say it. Pushing gender on people is wrong, but getting rid of it as an individual expression is dumb and impossible. This title's a strong one to gather clicks, so a lot of people come in and ask about it immediately. Sort of. It's kind of devolved into this like fascist, racist discussion, so I don't think I was trying to clickbait, but sorry if you saw it that way. I love my gender roles, low on carbs. The R word is not as bad as the N word, but R word, F word are an issue even though they are not as bad as the N word. Yeah, I think the F word is much more comparable because, like the slur for gay people, again, what possible context have people ever used it in other than to specifically disparage gay people? Would I tell? I guess maybe, I mean, I haven't thought this out. Maybe I'll say something stupid now in real time, but the idea of saying like, hey, it's bad to be gay, I think is bad. Hey, it's bad to be black, I think is bad. Hey, it's bad to be mentally impaired. Like, I don't think you're necessarily disparaging every single mentally impaired person, say, hey, you're all bad. But if you had a choice between being mentally impaired and not being mentally impaired, of course, being mentally impaired is worse. And describing someone's argument and or behavior as you are akin to someone who is not functioning fully like you are impaired, that's why I use it. It feels like an accurate descriptor. But again, open to having my mind changed. The way of getting away from the N-word is by making it cringe. It's never going to be cringe because cool black people say it. People use it on feminine men all the time. Yeah, unfortunately, the F slur. Oh, thank you, Kubrick, for the 100 R's. I don't know what that is, but thank you. Maybe we have the wrong way connecting with these words, like how black people took back the word. We retards should take it back as well. Yeah, let's do it. Let's take it back. Um, all right, I'm gonna read a couple more chats and then I'm gonna go watch the next 3 episodes of Andor. I'm so excited. I think it comes down to saying the word to someone who could always just educate themselves instead of being stupid isn't a problem. Okay, yeah, I agree with that. I think the Elder Scrolls is better than Lord of the Rings. I would disagree with that. Wouldn't most people prefer to be white? Okay, that's different because being black is not worse. Being treated as a black person in society is worse. So yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of black people who might say, I would, if I could re-up at the end of the year, I might switch to white because of all the shitty racism I experience. However, that is very different from saying, hey, obviously having a brain that functions not as well as a brain that does function is, not as preferable. Argentinian pesos. Well, thank you for the Argentinian pesos. I get to reclaim the N word, R word, and F word. I am enlightened. So you're a gay, black, non-neurotypical. That's what I got from that sentence. It's all about the unjust hierarchies. Mental illness, disability, and sexual orientation, gender, race, and class are part of reinforcing that hierarchy. I sort of agree. Mildly muscular mom. It's a very Bay Area argument. I'll say that. Just be proud of your race and not be racist. Hard disagree. Anyone who's proud of their race is probably pretty cringe. I get the idea of saying black pride insofar as a pushback against oppression, but taking credit for things that you did not do is pretty cringe in my opinion. I think you can be proud of other people. You can say, I'm proud of the black people for overcoming this. But saying like, oh, yeah, like I'm guys, German pride because the Germans invented this thing. It's like, motherfucker, you didn't do shit. Now, maybe if it's like the work ethic of all Germans that you participate in, but I just saw chat get deleted. I can't read that. Sorry. Star Wars, more like Star bores me to death. No, Andor's amazing. Go watch it. Well, dude, the same thing goes for the mentally impaired. Being autistic doesn't make you inherently worse than non-autistic people. I agree. In fact, some autistic people are better in some ways than non-autistic people. However, autistic people aren't retarded. Retarded, as in slow, as in your brain is impaired in some way, I would not say that is necessarily autism. Autism is a different expression of certain things. I completely would not categorize that in the same way I would say, yeah, people with Down syndrome have impairments. They like cannot function in the same way as you would if you were born without Down syndrome. So that's a very different thing. I think that's why the fact that autistic people get on my case for saying retarded is like, well, first of all, I think the people that would otherwise be called this aren't like if it was a medical term. I mean, maybe if you said everyone with any mental impairment, including autism, is retarded. Like, yeah, if that's how they categorized them back in like I don't know the 50s and 60s. But like, no, autism I think is a completely different thing. Now, severe autism, like when they are nonverbal and can't function in society, you could call that maybe they are, retarded. Don't call them retarded, but like you understand I'm saying their brain is slower or their brain is not functioning to the same degree as someone without that severe autism is. Completely different case though. And again, I don't think that the people that are autistic complaining about the word are those people because they would not be functioning in the same way. Okay, well now there's a bunch more chats. I was gonna finish. Even if you don't watch Star Wars, watch Ender. Agreed. You just convinced me to watch Ender. Fuck yes. Not what I meant. Just be comfortable in your own skin. Okay, yeah, cool. Mole Arrow David, thank you for clarifying. I take credit for all the good things my ancestors did and my own individual when it comes to what they did wrong. Hell yeah, based. When will scientific stuff go back to the cool NASA stuff instead of race, science, and tech, bro? I love rockets and space. Sorry, capitalism wins, buddy. Not happening. Is autism not classified as a mental illness? I think to some degree, but I don't want to speak with authority. I'm sure it's in the DSM-5. Just because you think of your specific definition of word does not invalidate what other people think. I agree, Jacob, and that is why I understand that people get upset by it, and they can look at what I mean and when I clarify, and if they get upset by it, I'll explain. Now, I think this could be taken to an absurd degree, and I've seen people say, this is so ridiculous. They're like, oh, I call people the N-word, but I only call the bad black people the N-word. It just means bad black person. So if a black person gets upset, they don't understand that I mean it to just mean the bad ones. That's ridiculous. I think that's not the same as when I'm saying retarded. I think more people understand the concept of what retarded means, but that's just me. I understand people have if you would call severe autism people the R word, why would you call anyone? Sorry. I would not call someone with severe autism the R word. I would not call anyone with a severe mental handicap that caused them not to be able to function correctly the R word. I would say the R word, retard, like to retard, or your intelligence is retarded insofar as it is slower than someone without your condition, is accurate only insofar as if I was describing it in this specific sentence. That doesn't mean you should call people who are mentally impaired retarded. When I call someone retarded, it is because they are not mentally impaired, however, acting as if they are mentally impaired. All right. It's a learning disability. Yeah. The N word just has a lot more cultural taboo too. Yes, agreed. Isn't it just easier to call someone stupid or dumb? I have switched to that exclusively. And then they say, did you know that dumb was actually a condition for these specific people and you are disparaging them? And I'm like, okay, I'll use stupid. No, actually, this is disparaging. Obviously, retarded gets more flack, but all of these things I've been called out for. And I'm just, I think this specific thing, so silly to police. Especially when my opponents politically are going to use it with impunity. And I don't want to spend half my time fighting on which words I can and cannot say that I think are pretty gray area in terms of how bad they are, when I want to be fighting against the people who are taking all my rights away. All right. Okay. Well, I was about to leave, but now AR says, hey, is the chat open to all questions? I have a general question about the channel, and you can, while you're figuring out what your question is, AR. I want to say this. Tomorrow, like they said, I'm going on that Gibbs debate about the state of the Democratic Party, why they lost. And I do have some new things to say about that, so I hope you'll find that interesting. Friday, I might be going on like a dating show, apparently. It might not happen. Not a big deal. I'm currently working on the next video, which is on Charlottesville. I know you say, wait, why would we talk about that 8 years after it happened? I agree, and yet people are still talking about it, so I need to address it. And then I have a really fun one after that about Project 2025. And the workout video will come after that. So looking forward to all of those. Okay, Purple asks, what's your opinion on the H3 iDubbbz drama? I think that H3 is not a great debater. However, he was upset about how Hassan was treating him, and I think that's fine. I think Hassan is not a great debater, and he was upset about the, Israeli genocide, which is a very valid thing to be upset about. I think they talked past each other and it was really annoying, and I just don't care. It's just fucking drama slop. I wish that they could just put aside their differences and do a charity stream for disaffected people in Gaza and say, who fucking gives a shit about the stupid bullshit yelling at each other? It's so unimportant. Just switch to saying intelligently delayed individual. No, because if I say that, which is actually I think a medically and PC way to describe someone who does have that, then they're gonna fucking get on my case for it, because yeah, you shouldn't do that. Oh, my little soy boy going on his first date. No, it's a dating show. I don't think any dates happen, and I probably will not like the girls on it. What's with the YouTuber mustache trend? I think I don't have just a mustache, but I can see that's particularly accentuated right now. Do I dabble in British politics? Not really. I don't think that fantasy is the genre of fascists. Not specifically, but I think it does attract a lot of fascism because of the tropes. May I ask if you recap what you covered? We covered the idea of racism in Tolkien and other fantasy books, how racism is perpetuated in these communities, whether or not you are invoking racism by describing an entire group of people with traits that are specifically evocative of real life traits. So if I were to say, hey, all the orcs look like Mongolians, that's bad. Why is there an ad every 5 minutes? I don't know. Probably because I put the high aggressive ad on the stream. Which I should tone back probably. I didn't know it was every 5 minutes. That's unacceptable. I thought it was like every 10 or 20. All right. I'm going to head off. Oh, AR. There's your question. This is why I was still on. I have noticed that you avoid Israel most of the videos. Is that a conscious decision? Sort of. Not I'm not avoiding it per se. I avoid speaking on things that I really don't know jack shit about. So like I read the 100 Years Wars on Palestine. I've looked at some of the debates in Israel-Palestine. I just don't know like what I can say in the conversation that hasn't already been said, or if I even have like a strong moral and justified opinion on it that like would evoke any sort of action to be taken. I think what's happening to the people in Gaza is abhorrent, unacceptable, and they need all the aid they can get. I think Israel is not like, oh, well, we're just trying to kill, all of Hamas. And it's like, okay, well, I don't give a shit if you have the most justified, like, amazing possible, like, oh, we are stopping the world's most evil thing. If in doing so you are required to kill tens of thousands of innocent people, it's unacceptable. And I think that both the Democrats and the Republicans are never going to really hold them to account. It's unacceptable. That said, I think that Hamas and the people supporting them is also bad. And I don't know if this is like a fence sitting thing. Because like, I'm not saying, oh, these are the same. Obviously, there's a huge power imbalance. But the reason I don't talk about it is like, what the fuck am I going to say? Like, hey, I think that this should fucking stop. Done. Okay. Hey, I put a charity in my inauguration video that says, hey, please give mutual aid to the people that are affected by this genocide. That's kind of all I got. Like, it just fucking sucks, and I can't do anything about it. Versus, I think there's much more to be done about other things. So I do think these people need help. You're welcome, AR. Thank you for asking the question. I know that some people had that concern too. So let me just see what the things are. That's a pretty okay take. Okay, cool. Thanks. Where do I buy these pills? You cannot buy soy pills, but maybe I will make them. With that in mind, you're going to love these next Andor episodes. Oh, God, if someone spoils this, I'm going to die. So thank you all for joining. See you tomorrow. If you jump into the Gibbs debate, type 1 down the deep state. Love you guys. And thanks for, guys, my subscriber count is skyrocketing right now. I really, really appreciate your support. Like I said, this has been the happiest last 6 months of my life, and I'm really enjoying it. So you guys are all awesome. I'll see you guys later.